Number 10. Dark Ages. In this alternate Earth, after a battle with an ancient galaxy-attacking robot called the Unmaker, Doctor Strange opened a portal to create an EMP that would defeat the Unmaker. This worked, but he died before he could close it. This resulted in a huge EMP that shut off all electricity on Earth. This led to various wars in the post-apocalypse, killing billions of people. Eventually, things calmed down and people lived in various communities, surviving against attacks from vampires and werewolves. In Europe, however, the mutant apocalypse had taken over, and using brainwashed geniuses from around the world began attempting to reawaken the Unmaker for his own villainous deeds. Number 9. Hulk Future Imperfect. This won't be the first Hulk-related post-apocalypse on this list. Being virtually indestructible, most apocalyptic events don't really do much to physically harm the Incredible Hulk. This includes the possible future of the Hulk Future Imperfect storyline, where 100 years after a nuclear war turned the world into a wasteland, the Hulk became the ruler of humanity inside the city of Dystopia, which is a fitting name. This Hulk had the intelligence of Banner and double the strength of the current Hulk from being subjected to the radiation of the nuclear war. The city is policed by futuristic soldiers and the Dogs of War, which are robot dogs created by the Hulk to defeat the first Maestro, Hercules. The new Hulk Maestro is a nuclear, twisted, super powerful version of the character, and the world he inhabits is a very early 90s comic book post-apocalypse. 2 universes down, and I already want to let you know how much I appreciate you watching. Wow, you must be hitting that like and subscribe button a lot, huh? Well, don't stop though. It helps keep our universe from becoming an apocalypse! Number 8. Marvel Universe vs. the Punisher. In this universe, the Punisher interrupts an arms deal that leads to him being doused in a chemical experiment that, for Frank Castle, makes him immune to infection, illness, and disease. The chemical weapon got into the water though, and then into the food, and starting in New York, it spread to the whole world through infected travelers from JFK Airport. And all this before it started turning people into cannibals. In this universe, Spider-Man was the first cannibal to be seen by the public, having defeated Rhino in Madison Square Garden, and then eating him in front of the viewers of a hockey game. After this, an outbreak spread and led to insane events, including a war against the cannibals, who became the dominant beings of this earth. But the real star of the show is Frank Castle, the Punisher. This is one of the greatest and most brutal Punisher stories. It plays on many of his character flaws and strengths, but the story also shows him killing so many different heroes who you and I have always wanted to see him face. Number 7. Battleworld. Okay, yes, this is kind of cheating, but also not really. I mean, the apocalyptic event, the incursions, is part of the mainline continuity, but the Battleworld, created by God Emperor Doom, is also an alternate Earth. So I put it lower on the list just to be more fair. But this place and the story that it is part of are just really good. The world itself is made up of various domains, some of which were made up of the remains of other worlds and realities that are ruled over by barons appointed by God Emperor Doom. Some of these domains could have whole videos devoted to just their stories. What makes this place even cooler is that Doom's battle world was policed by a group known as the Thor Corps. It's a police force made up of different versions of Thor. I think it is just the coolest thing ever. But yeah, Battleworld. I don't know, let's debate this one down in the comments. Number 6. Hulk the End. In a world where a nuclear war has wiped out every single other human, Bruce Banner and the Hulk persona inside of him are basically forced to roam the wastes. It is an extremely deep and personal Hulk story. The main conflict in this story is the relationship between Bruce, who wants to finally be able to die, and the Hulk, who wants to prove he is the strongest being on planet Earth. A lot happens, and eventually, Bruce Banner suffers a heart attack that does in fact kill him, meaning the Hulk persona emerges and cannot revert back to Banner, or it will die too, leaving Hulk the only living sentient creature, which he slowly realizes means he is going to be feeling alone and cold for the rest of his life. This story is arguably the best of the end stories, so do yourself a favor and read it. Number 5. Age of Ultron. In this story, the Hank Pym created Ultron rules the world with his Sentinels, having killed all of the heroes other than Captain America, Spider-Man, Hawkeye, Iron Man, Emma Frost, She-Hulk, Luke Cage, Invisible Woman, and Wolverine. Ultron isn't even here in the time the story begins. He's actually in the future, where he already won, making sure this stays the case by remotely controlling the Vision in the current time. Gotta love time travel. From a hidden base in the Savage Land, some heroes go into the future to stop Ultron, and are quickly defeated. But Wolverine, followed by Invisible Woman, goes to the past to kill Hank Pym. After realizing that this creates an even worse future, they go back again to stop themselves from killing Hank, instead getting Hank to put a failsafe inside Ultron that will stop him if he attacks again. So many things happen in the Marvel landscape because of this. Time travel always hurts my brain. Number 4. Marvel Zombies. When an alternate version of the Sentry that has been infected with the zombie-like virus invades the Earth of 2149, we get the Marvel Zombies story. Seems like a worthwhile trade-off to me. Unlike a few of the other stories on this list, this alternate reality story takes place during its apocalypse, which in this case makes for a much more interesting story, showing us how the superhero world is affected when you introduce a zombie infection. These zombies aren't your typical mindless zombies though. These zombies actually have seemingly more intelligence. It's just that they are possessed by a deep, uncontrollable hunger that takes precedent over almost any other emotion. The zombies quickly took over the world and eventually over their entire universe. Nuts. Number 3. Days of Future Past. In this alternate Earth story, the Sentinels were created by Bolivar Trask to save humanity from the threat of mutant existence. This mutant-fearing sentiment became shared by the public after the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants assassinated Senator Robert Kelly, causing the newly elected president to greenlight the Sentinel program. In a classic AI turn of events though, the Sentinels realized that the only way to truly save humanity was to rule over humanity. They took over the United States and began to kill or catch basically every single superhuman, even the ones that aren't mutants. Some of these mutants were held in mutant internment centers, and thank the Lord, because if they didn't do this, we wouldn't get this story, where a few heroes band together to send the mind of Kitty Pryde back to the past to reverse the event that led to the Sentinel Revolution. Number 2. Age of Apocalypse. More time travel. Okay, so the Age of Apocalypse came to be when the son of Xavier, the Mutant Legion, set out back in time with a team of X-Men to kill Magneto before he could incite the anti-mutant movement. This went rather horribly when he instead killed his own father accidentally, causing his own existence to be impossible. This created a time paradox. In this splintered reality, Earth 295, Apocalypse began his world domination 20 years earlier, before there were no Fantastic Four, Avengers, or other heroes to stop him. Apocalypse took over North America with his 4 horsemen, who divided up the continent and ruled over other mutants, except for the new X-Men team led by Magneto, the unworthy, and those who opposed them. The story has way more happening in it that is almost impossible for me to cover in this one little segment. And it also was super important for the character and publication history of the mutants and X-Men. It's a well put together, intriguing story, and it deserves your eyes. Number 1. Old Man Logan and Hawkeye. You had to know I was going to talk about this. This is quite possibly my second favorite Marvel story after Marvel 1602. The apocalypse in this universe was basically all the villains winning. In the usual hero stories, villains face against their usual villains and are always defeated. But in Old Man Logan, the villains organize themselves where simultaneously, different villains and groups of villains will go against heroes that their abilities are best suited to deal with. For example, instead of fighting Spider-Man and his spider sense, Mysterio is sent against Wolverine. And using his illusions, he got Wolverine to murder all the other X-Men. It was pretty brutal. The conflict ended up turning the United States into an apocalyptic wasteland, ruled over by the Red Skull, with territories divided up and ruled over by a few different villains. Almost all the heroes are dead, or they changed sides, or they are working as mercenaries, or in the case of Logan, they are retired. The story set in this post-apocalyptic universe is just a work of art, and you gotta give it a read.
Number 10. Earth 64211. This reality is quite dark and quite scary, especially for Black Bolt. Here, Maximus, Black Bolt's brother, devised a plan to steal the throne of Attilan and of the Inhumans by disguising himself as his brother. When this plan appeared to be destined to fail due to memory detectors installed around the palace in preparation, he made the Inhuman Telegar make it so that he not only looked identical to Black Bolt, but also had his distinct superpowered vocal cords keyboards and his memories as well, erasing Maximus's. Still, Maximus was not trained to hold back his voice, and the pain of the procedure caused him to cry out, exposing his treachery and causing him to be banished from Attilan to Taros. However, Maximus gave himself Black Bolt's memories, and therefore he didn't actually remember his role in this plot, leaving him to ponder upon this revelation if he was indeed Maximus turned into Black Bolt, or simply Black Bolt and Maximus had actually succeeded in usurping him. He couldn't remember who he was anymore. Number 9. That time Thanos helped an old lady cross the street. This alternate reality seems to be unnumbered, but exists based off the story that Cosmic Ghost Rider tells us in the Thanos 2016 annual. Connor diving into Thanos Wins on the part 1 of this list made me remember how much I love that comic, but especially the annual, which features multiple stories which are all, or at least appear to be, set in alternate worlds. In one such story, Thanos helps a little old lady cross the street, seemingly at first out of the kindness of his heart. I know, shocking, right? Well, of course it turns out that even this act is quite sinister, and that Thanos really did it only to delay a bus from stopping, thereby preventing Stephanie Kircher from bumping into and meeting Suzanne. This meeting would set Stephanie on a path which would turn her into Earth's savior, allowing her to end world hunger, cure disease, and dismantle inequality. Thanos even visits Stephanie on her deathbed to give her a vision of what could have been of the life she missed out on because he delayed her bus, stopping by a few moments, preventing her from bumping into Suzanne. Pretty evil stuff, right? And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn about even more scary alternate Earths from Marvel, there are tons of those, so be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Earth 51412. One of the freakiest realities that I could think of visiting would be the one that belongs to Patton Parnell. Patton Parnell is probably one of the most disturbing Spider-Man alternates around, who literally turned into a sadistic man-spider-like monster when he got his powers. Well, he was actually probably always sadistic and sociopathic to some extent, but getting spider-like powers, which also turned him into a humanoid spider-like creature, probably didn't help the guy. Number 7. Earth 11080. Also known as the Last Gun on Earth reality. Here, Punisher once more faces off against the Marvel Universe. But instead of it just being a comic book trope this time around, Frank is actually not just out for vengeance, but seeks to save the world by facing off against many famous Marvel heroes and villains. This is because on this alternate Earth a virus was released that caused those infected to become violent and cannibalistic. Here Spider-Man ends up patient zero after devouring the villain Rhino live on national television. And well, I think you can imagine how dark it gets from there. It just gets darker and darker and darker. You're like, wow, it's like pitch black in this universe. I cannot see. Someone turn on a light in here. Number 6. Earth 18138. Another scary alternate reality tied to Thanos, as some are known to be. I mean, Thanos is a pretty scary dude. Actually came about because a hero was trying to redeem the villain and raise Thanos instead to be a hero. The hero who attempted this, however, wasn't really great at doing so, and instead made the future worse as a result. This hero was Frank Castle alternate Cosmic Ghost Rider. The thing with Cosmic Ghost Rider is that he only became Ghost Rider as a final gambit to try and save the universe. This was after Frank was killed when Thanos attacked the Earth. By the time Frank had made his deal to become a spirit of vengeance and returned as Ghost Rider, it was pretty much too late. He spent an eternity alone and was driven pretty crazy by the solitude. He went on to get the power Cosmic, became a Herald of Galactus, and when he still failed to stop Thanos, joined him instead. After that, history was wiped from existence, in which Thanos won. Cosmic Ghost Rider ended up in Valhalla for a while before realizing he wasn't really happy there, it wasn't really his thing, and being permitted by Odin to leave in order to travel back in time and try and kill Thanos to prevent a future like the one he was from ever becoming possible. Cosmic Ghost Rider couldn't bring himself to kill the then innocent baby Thanos though, and instead went on adventures with him, trying to teach him to be good. But it turns out Frank Castle wasn't necessarily an expert on the subject of heroism and goodness himself. This version of Thanos grows up instead to become a dictator, removing freedom of choice from those he rules, making them be good and banishing those who refuse to submit and obey him. That's like too much goodness. You shouldn't be trying to make people be good. Kind of gotta let them do their own thing, otherwise then you're kind of evil. Kind of defeats the whole point. Thanos. Number 5. What if Ultron won? While the What If comic book series sometimes takes us to weird and hilarious alternate realities, this time around the Disney Plus and Marvel animated series took us to one of the most depressing realities yet. In episode 8 of the series, we get to see into a reality where Ultron won the day. In fact, he won all of the days to come. Black Widow and Hawkeye are the only remaining survivors, it seems, who are attempting to fight back against Ultron and stop him, once and for all, at any cost. However, in the end, Ultron finds a way to break free of his fate at being defeated, using his own power and the Infinity Stones to escape his own reality and threaten the existence of all lives across the multiverse. Is there anything scarier than this? I don't think so. Number 4. Life 9 of Moira X. During the relaunch of the X-Men books, the mutants were given a refresh when it came to their history and when it came to making sense of seemingly all the almost separate lives that they've kind of lived, all the different eras of X-Men. Moira McTaggart was revealed to be a mutant codenamed Moira X, whose power was reincarnation, with her dying and being reborn from her mother's womb once more, but with the knowledge of all the previous lives she had lived prior to that one. Moira's 9th life, the timeline that precedes 616 from her perspective, saw Moira join with Apocalypse in order to try to find a way to protect the mutants against the inevitable, man who create machines, Sentinels, to destroy them, and in so doing often end up destroying humanity as well. Despite uniting with the powerful mutant Apocalypse in this reality, technology once more ended up being the end of both humanity and mutant kind, with this reality's destruction being linked back to the existence of Nimrod. In order to prevent this dystopian and apocalyptic reality from coming to pass, Moira ends up getting information on how Nimrod was created and allows herself to be killed and reborn with said information so that she might be able to prevent Nimrod from coming online in her next life. And, you know, make the next reality not so awful in the end. Of course, Nimrod has come online, so I'm pretty sure we're all doomed. But anyways, number 3, Earth 21129. Yikes! Is this one scary? Also coming to us from another glimpse into the Darkhold during the Darkhold event. In this reality, we see a darker potential future for Tony Stark, as he works to create his Iron Man suit. In Darkhold Iron Man, Stark creates the suit with the help of his own team of employees and friends, only to discover that removing it also removes his skin, with said pieces of armor. Forced to stay within the suit for his own safety, Tony Stark, with help from Pepper Potts, worked tirelessly to find a way to fix this small but very disturbing glitch. In the end, Stark ends up believing that the suit is superior and, as like with the Cybermen of Doctor Who, believes that everyone on Earth should merge with the suit, giving up their more squishy human form in favor of the armor, which is better at protecting them, despite the fact that the suits kinda slowly break down your biological form and fully merge with those who wear them. Disturbing, I know. And then in the end they're like, everyone gets an Iron Man suit. Don't worry, just get in the Iron Man suit. Nothing bad will happen. Number 2, Zombieverse. I wish I could do a list like this without talking about the Marvel Zombieverse, sometimes referred to as Earth Z, but I don't think I can. Also, Connor did his best to stay away from Marvel Zombies on part 1, which means it kind of falls to me to talk about it, because I don't think we can really do a scariest alternate Marvel Universes series without at least mentioning Marvel Zombies. And then of course the thing with that is if we mention it, the trauma that I have experienced personally from reading the series set in this universe means that I have to boost it up on our list. Yeah, Marvel Zombies has left emotional scars on me, okay? It's stuck with me. Every time I come back to it, I'm like reliving the horror again. Mainly, what still haunts me to this day is the time that zombie Ant-Man captured human Black Panther and kept him alive so that he could saw off pieces of T'Challa to feed on, keeping his former friend as his own little secret snack. Very, very disturbing. I'm sure that'll never come up again, I hope. Number 1, What If? Zombies. This other alternate zombie reality comes to us from the Marvel and Disney Plus animated show, What If? In this series, we get glimpses into alternate Marvel cinematic realities via the Watcher, who pretty much sees all. Each episode features a standalone story, but these episodes also come together in the end of this first season, as the threads from each story kind of end up connecting when the Watcher creates the Guardians of the Multiverse team to help to defend the various realities against Ultron, who we talked about earlier on. The reason that I put this zombie universe above the comic book one is because despite the small shimmer of hope we get in this episode and in this reality, a lot of heroes still die, and in some cases quite gruesomely. And we know it's not over yet because we're getting a whole Marvel Zombies animated series. Oh boy, I can't wait. Good news is that writer Zeb Wells appears to be the mastermind behind that show, and I love Zeb Wells' writing, so I'm sure I will actually enjoy it. But the bad news is we still got Black Panther sliced up, but this time to defeat a crazy powerful zombified version of Scarlet Witch. Double yikes. Double trauma for Amanda. Why? I was like, they're probably not gonna do that in this episode, and then they did it, and I was like, why? Why did we do this? I can't, I really don't like that part. I don't like it. Oh well, it's over now. Black Panther got away. It's fine. He's fine. Nothing bad will happen, I'm sure, and the world will be saved by our heroes. I'm sure.
Coming in at number 10 is the tale of ice giant Thor. A perfect what if tale. It's almost surprising that it wasn't done before this point. In What If Thor in 2018, we get the story of what if Thor was raised by frost giants instead of Loki being raised by Asgardians. Simple, but brilliant. Laufey, the king of the frost giants, defeats Odin in their battle so long ago. And just as Odin took the infant Loki, Laufey takes the kid Thor and raises him as his own. Loki is obviously here too, and like usual, they form a pretty tight bond as adoptive brothers, Loki and Thor. Unfortunately though, due to Thor's strength and skill in battle, not to mention his fondness for summoning the power of lightning, he is praised among the frost giants and by Laufey himself, who begins to completely forget Loki, his actual true son. Instead, Loki finds the captured Freya in the dungeons and she teaches him how to use magic. Loki eventually busts her out of prison and together they attempt to escape to Midgard. They go to the ruins of old Asgard and attempt to repair the Rainbow Bridge until Thor and Laufey show up. Loki ends the life of his father while Thor unknowingly ends his mother with a blast from his giant ice hammer known as Ice Crusher. Thor almost takes out his brother as well, but at the last minute, he lets him go. Now we don't know what happens next, only that Loki went to Midgard, had kids and a family, and apparently became a hero. It ends on a rather sweet note, and I think that's lovely. Number 9, Fantastic Four as cosmonauts? Next, let's explore the what if story that begs the question of what if the Fantastic Four were Russian. Well, for starters, their name is different. In fact, actually, they're pretty much all different. Now called the UFFF, or the Ultimate Federalist Freedom Fighters, the team is made up of Rudion Richards, the commie Reed Richards, who instead of stretching can just pop off his limbs and send them out over long distances, which is way more alarming than having to stretch. Natalia Romanova, the 616 Black Widow, is also on the team as Widowmaker and can control electromagnetic energy. Pyotr Rasputin is also on the team, but he's still just Colossus and has all those powers, except his body and mind are deteriorating over time. And lastly, his sister, Ilyana Rasputina, is also on the team, who seems to have the powers of Sue Storm, but we only ever see her go invisible, which is way less cool. After the demise of Stalin in this history, the team is put under the KGB control, and Rudd Richards, easily the strangest member of the team, is not okay with it, especially after he accidentally ended the life of Giant Man while on a mission. Widowmaker makes widows of the wives of the leaders of the KGB, and the superhero team goes on to fight for freedom and equality, which is not at all how I thought the story would go, but hey, it's good. Number 8, Jane Foster becomes Thor. Now, thankfully, Jane Foster as Thor has happened in the true 616 continuity, and it was really awesome. But here, it's a little different in this what if story. Number 10, actually. It is Jane Foster who first picks up the hammer Mjolnir, not Donald Blake. In this story, Jane accompanies Dr. Blake on his trip to Norway, and when he drops his cane into a ravine in the original, she instead goes down there to get it for him. Striking the stick on the ground, just like Donald Blake would have, she becomes Thordis. Yes, Thordis. Unlike the modern interpretation, a female wielding Mjolnir gets an entirely new name in this what if. Wielding the power of Thor, Thordis fights off the Saturn Rock people and then turns the cane that she seems to have just stolen from Donald Blake into a hairbrush to better fit in with her feminine alter ego, I guess, because men don't use hairbrushes. She has pretty much the same adventures as Thor, but crucially, she is rejected by Odin for not being a man. Oh, and for some reason, Sif gets with Donald Blake, which is kind of weird. This tracks all the way up until the events of Ragnarok, when Odin decides to give the hammer back to Donald Blake because he can't accept Jane as Thor. And then, as thanks, he turns Jane into a different god and then marries her. It's kind of gross, it's kind of really strange, it's kind of uncomfortable, but luckily it's only a story that comes from asking the question, what if? Number 7. World War II Space Nick Fury. 1979's What If number 14 gives us a very different approach to history. Instead of World War II being fought in Europe, it is instead fought in space. In this alternate timeline, we discovered interstellar travel much earlier in our history, and as such, the World War II we fight is more like space sector war between Sector Alpha and Sector Beta in space. And don't ask me to define where those areas are because I cannot. I don't know how space works. As this is still set at the same general time as the regular World War II though, some of the same characters are going to be involved, including the original Nick Fury and his Howling Commandos. This story has new high-tech weaponry, fishbowl helmets, and aliens, and it's a good bit of fun. We learn in the story that Admiral von Strucker is actually working with the alien Axis powers to create a master race. So it seems that in this alternate world we can master interstellar travel, but we still just can't accept each other for our differences yet. Damn, that's kind of realistic, ain't it? Number 6. Civil War Captain America. Honestly, I'm kind of a fan of this what if story, but it does have some strange moments and twists on characters that you might not expect. For example, the story starts out with our Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes time displaced to the Civil War era. Bucky is the commander of a regiment and he is not a good guy. Apart from being an unhealthy amount of racist, he has quite the lack of moral compass. Our Steve, however, obviously starts out as his scrawny and less than impressive self, but with a heart that shines through as strong and good as gold. After sustaining injuries from not following his commander's orders, he is recovering in a nearby Union camp tended to by a Private Wilson, taken in by the Shawnee at a young age. Sensing the goodness in his heart, Wilson bestows a kind of eagle animal spirit on Mr. Rogers that makes you on the outside whatever you are on the inside. That's how he describes it. And this happens just as Bucky Barnes stumbles upon their location. The power of the ritual blasts away Barnes, and when we see his face again, he has become the White Skull. Which, I mean, you could just call him the Skull because skulls are white, but whatever. Steve, on the other hand, has become a mystical super soldier wielding a shield and sporting a headdress. It's insane. He goes on to save presidents, end the war, and leave a lasting legacy of Captain and General Americas that continues all the way to the modern day. Number 5. Barbarian Hulk. Alright, this one requires a bit of unpacking. So, in issue 23 of What If, the Incredible Hulk has fallen in love with a woman named Jarella, a green-skinned queen from the subatomic world of Kai, who was brought back to our world when the Hulk was unshrunk in the actual continuity. Now, this happens in regular continuity like I just said, but she is unfortunately laid to rest after sacrificing herself to save a boy from some rubble during a Hulk battle. In this story, however, Jarella lives, and the Hulk and her are shrunk again so they can go and live happily ever after on the subatomic level in the kingdom of Kai. Now, Kai, for some reason, takes a very medieval, Roman / just ancient in general approach to lifestyle, and Hulk, who now possesses his full intelligence, becomes king of the land alongside Jarella. Soon after that though, a dark plot by some dark gods and their dark minions rears its ugly head, and the Hulk, alongside a group of other subatomic barbaric heroes, goes to thwart them, facing off against a second Savage Hulk that came out of nowhere that seems to have been taken down in like 2 comic panels. It's really weird, and that's where it ends. I'm assuming Hulk just kind of stays on the subatomic level and never returns to Earth, living as a microscopic barbarian for the rest of his life. Probably the best thing for him, honestly. Number 4. Thanos. Okay, so bear with me here. In the What If Infinity Dark Reign story, Norman Osborn, after becoming the director of Hammer and the Dark Avengers, figures out how to get his hands on the Infinity Gauntlet, defeating the Illuminati and all the heroes and becoming the Goblin King. Now, using the gauntlet, he creates a world completely under his tyrannical rule, and he teleports his horrible father from the past to show him the things that he has done in an attempt to get his father's love and admiration, something he has never had and still doesn't, honestly. His father begins to bash him for becoming a tyrannical ruler, which is a little worse given the fact that it was his father's fault that Norman even turned out this way. Teleporting them both back to the Dark Avengers base, the entire team has been wiped out. And as Norman is trying to figure out what happened, it's revealed that Thanos has shown up to collect the gauntlet in his awesome Thanos fashion. It's actually pretty sweet. Unfortunately though, not even the Mad Titan is a match for someone wielding the gauntlet, and he is dispatched. But not before he tells Norman that he is trying to get the love of someone who will never give it to him. After Thanos is gone, Norman's father, being forced by the Infinity Stones, begins to tell Norman how great he is, and Norman loses it, wiping his father from all existence, all time, and all space. Which was dumb, because now Norman Osborn's existence is a paradox, and he, and this world that he created, fade into nothingness. So yes, Thanos is the hero here in a very, very weird way. Number 3, T'Challa Star-Lord. One of the better, if not weirder, episodes of Disney Plus's What If animated series revolves around a universe where instead of Peter Quill, it was actually Prince T'Challa of Wakanda who was abducted by the Ravagers all the way back in the day. T'Challa, as the new Star-Lord, convinced the Ravagers to become a Robin Hood-like group who steal from the rich and give it to the less fortunate. Under his leadership, they became icons, and they saved a lot of people, recruited and persuaded lots of heroes and villains to join the Ravagers to help the galaxy, one of which even being Thanos. T'Challa heard of the orb on Morag, the one from the beginning of the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and he goes there to retrieve it, being stopped by Korath the Pursuer just like Peter Quill was in the movie. Unlike Peter though, Korath actually recognizes T'Challa as Star-Lord, and he joins up as well. He saved Peter Quill from Ego, saved Drax's family, got Nebula and Thanos to reconnect, and even stole a device from the Collector that could terraform ecosystems and save entire planets from starvation caused by overpopulation. You know, the entire thing Thanos was trying to fix. He eventually joins the Guardians of the Multiverse to fight the insanely powered Ultron, but that's a story for a different time. Number 2, Spider-Actor? In this What If number 19, Peter Parker makes the simple decision of stopping the robber who would go on to take Uncle Ben's life. That simple act robs Peter of the lesson of the responsibility of having great power, and instead he turns to a life in the public eye. Now, as an actor, Peter Parker turns his focus towards making films and protecting his reputation at almost any cost. He becomes the publicist for both the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, as well as Daredevil, all while still retaining his Spider-Man persona. He even gets a cool cape for a little bit, and that part is, I think that's like the cherry on top of this whole story. Now, when JJ exposes him to the public though, we see a bit more of an edge to this Spider-Man when he threatens him and even eventually ends his career, which comes back to bite him when Jonah forms the Sinister Six, including himself. And he's not really impressive in that team, he's just kind of there. It is only after Daredevil jumps in to save Peter and fight the villains that Peter does actually learn that old power and responsibility thing, and it all goes thumbs up from there. And finally, in at number 1, Intelligent Design God Hulk What If Planet Hulk. That's a long title. Most comic book readers, and especially fans of Marvel and the Hulk, know of the storyline where the Illuminati banished the Hulk from Earth to send him to another planet. He ended up crash landing on Sakaar and became a gladiator turned liberator turned ruler of the planet until his ship self-destructed, taking out his family and bringing him back to Earth with a vengeance that no guilty person was safe from. What if Planet Hulk ends up asking the question, what if the Illuminati's banishment had hit its original target? Now, in this story, Hulk lands on an incredibly peaceful and serene planet. And sure, he goes a bit ragey at first because he just got banished from Earth, but he eventually realizes the planet is inhabited by a race of peaceful creatures. Little tiny peaceful creatures. Over long periods of time, the Hulk helps this race to evolve and become a thriving civilization. They end up viewing the Hulk as their god and he basically acts as one that leads them to wealth and prosperity. It's one of the few Hulk stories that doesn't end in tears, and I'm more than happy to talk about that for that reason alone.
And speaking of knowledge, let's get counting. Number 10, Marvel's Lifeline. One of the best things about the Ultimate line was what it did for Marvel as a company and a publisher. It provided a lifeline to Marvel at a time when it needed it the most. The comics industry bubble that once had made collectibles so valuable had burst. The hype and demand of the early 90s had vanished completely, leaving Marvel with tons of comics printed that would simply not sell. With the demand gone and production costs putting them into the red, Marvel was forced to sell off licenses to some of their best characters. This is how Sony got the rights to Spider-Man and how Fox got the rights to X-Men. And it's what prompted Marvel to change things up and create the Ultimate Universe. The Ultimate Universe was meant to be something fresh and new, free of continuity and ultimately more gritty, realistic, and with an edge. Amazingly, the new line of Ultimate Comics did well. So well that it provided Marvel with the stability it needed to recover. Without the Ultimate line, it's possible that we might not have the Marvel stories, animated series, films, or comics of today. That's how successful and important Ultimates was. Number 9, the Inhumans. I've said it before and I will say it again, I think the design of the Inhumans is much better on Earth 1610. They look more compelling and intimidating. Nothing against the 616 Inhumans, who I also like just fine, but I actually want to get to know these Inhumans more. Overall, I think the Ultimate Inhumans are a little more interesting than their main continuity counterparts. Number 8, no previous continuity. One of the best things that the Ultimate Universe and line offered readers was a fresh start, meaning that years and years of comic book history didn't really apply here. The idea was you didn't have to know what had gone on in the past or what was going on currently in the comics to just jump into a book, with comic book continuity being a concept that many new readers still find daunting today. This was freeing for consumers because it meant you could buy in without having to worry about potentially being confused because something from 20 years prior came up that you needed to understand in order to know what was really going on in the story. This wasn't the case for Earth 1610. At least, it wasn't the case to begin with. Freedom from continuity meant more creative freedom for writers, but unfortunately, Ultimates really only started as new reader accessible, but quickly became bogged down with intricate storytelling and details. It even ended up having retcons as well, which might confuse readers jumping in later on, with the first Ultimate Iron Man series being so out there that Marvel decided to retcon it out of existence, instead turning it into a ridiculous anime show set in the same universe, but that wasn't actually considered to be the true story of Iron Man. So that comic basically became like non-canon. Number 7, Sue and Reed splits. Finally, this reality is one where Sue seems to be more aware that Reed can never really fully commit to her. He proposes right before Ultimatum goes down and they are faced with a giant wave as a result. Sue manages to push the wave back but slips into a comatose state as a result, prompting Reed to go out looking to punish the villains and abandoning Sue, leaving her with the Thing, aka Ben Grimm. In the Ultimate Universe, Reed and Sue actually don't end up together in the end. In fact, Sue, after she's revived, finds out about a sinister plot of Reed's, realizing that he has become a villain. Ben attempts to try and explain how Reed could just be up to something that they both don't fully understand, but Sue is over making any more excuses for him, implying that she never wanted to marry him to begin with. In fact, Sue and Ben actually end up together, with Reed becoming a villain. For some reason, I actually find this to be just a better fit for these two characters, just in terms of their overall paths. As much as they've had some pretty sweet moments together on Earth 616, the couple has also had major problems over the years that sometimes seem just to get swept under the rug so that we can, try to keep them together without any resolution of those problems. This, however, provides us with some resolution and consequence for those moments, and it kind of addresses some of them, which I like. Just feels a little more realistic. Number 6, Nick Fury. Another great thing that the Ultimate Universe gave us was a new Nick Fury that was so successful he actually became the new version of Nick Fury in the main continuity, and inspired the MCU version of the character as well. Hilariously enough, Samuel L. Jackson's likeness inspired the redesign of the character. Fury would even acknowledge that Jackson would be his top pick to play him in a movie. The story goes that originally Samuel L. Jackson was actually not too happy about Marvel using his likeness without really asking him or without any compensation or conversation about it, but when he contacted them, they actually apologized and offered him the role of Nick Fury in any future films. Jackson supposedly was appeased and accepted the offer. And the rest, they say, is history. Today, I personally cannot imagine the MCU without him. Number 5, Death. Wait a minute, Amanda, didn't you just cite death as being a bad thing on your worst list? Yes, I did. We were talking about Ultimatum. But that was more death for the sake of death, not death in general. I actually enjoy when characters die. Well, I don't enjoy when they die, but more that I enjoy the finality that death invites. I like death as consequences, but more than that, I like the higher stakes that it gives us. If anyone at any point can die, it means that everything is more exciting because, you know, they might not make it back from that mission. Their actions carry more weight because there's a real risk that they face. When characters can die, it also means stories get to end, and with endings come new and exciting beginnings. Number 4, The Maker. Talk about unique spins on characters. The Maker definitely offered us a completely different take on Reed Richards, one that was more modern and actually felt like it kind of fit better, not just within the world, but within a more current day and age. I think a huge issue with the Fantastic Four that we see when it comes to adapting that team to sort of a film setting in the modern day is that the heroes are kind of stiff. They're definitely a product of the time period in which they were created, a perfect and kind of wholesome family unit. The Ultimate Universe shattered that expectation, broke up the Fantastic Four team, and gave us the amazing villain that is the Maker, a version of Reed Richards whose love and dedication to science actually makes him a horrifying, immoral, pretty much mad scientist type, if a mad scientist could somehow also be like disturbingly sane and logical. The Maker is one of the best villains to have ever existed in comics in general, not even just within the confines of the Ultimate Universe, which of course the Maker would also literally break free from in the comics. Number 3, Ultimate Spider-Man. Although there were many problems when it came to the continuity of the Ultimate Universe, the Spider-Man series was not one of them. In fact, Ultimate Spider-Man was more celebrated for being a breath of fresh air that remained consistently coherent throughout. To this day, it remains some fans' favorite Spider-Man comic series, period, and not just one of their favorite series within the Ultimate Universe. Some even hold this series above any of the Spider-Man main continuity stuff. Why was the Spider-Man series so good from Ultimates? It had a sense of finality, and it wasn't wishy-washy. It committed, it followed through, it offered fresh new takes on characters, and whether or not you loved all of those new takes, you had to respect them. Most of those changes were made to make Spider-Man's stories and characters feel more grounded, more realistic. Peter also returned to high school, which a lot of fans enjoyed because they felt it was younger Peter, Spider-Man in high school, that was kind of his most relatable version. So taking him back there felt really good. Number 2, Miles Morales. One of the greatest things to come out of Ultimate Spider-Man as well, the story and character of Miles Morales, whom we've all come to love very dearly. What's more, Peter's apparent death also paved the way for Miles, allowing him to step into the spotlight as Spider-Man, and even take over. Even after we learned that Peter Parker had actually survived as well and wasn't actually dead due to the Oz formula making him virtually immortal, he still decided to pass the torch to Miles. He'd had his time as a hero, now it was Miles' turn. I just love how the story goes. I love that Miles truly got to be the one and only Spider-Man on Earth 1610. And while I love Peter, I kind of hope we get to see Miles step into the spotlight as the one and only Spider-Man at some point on Earth 616 too. Or bring back a world where he is the one and only Spider-Man. Number 1, the MCU. The Ultimate line is what helped to pave the way for the MCU, and in fact provided much needed inspiration for the cinematic universe. There are many characters from Earth 1610 who have influenced their Earth 199999 counterparts. That is, their Marvel Cinematic Universe counterparts. Not only have characters from the Ultimate Universe found their way to the big screen through the MCU, but stories from the Ultimate line have also served to inspire some of those told to us in the films. Number 10, Tony and Natasha. Yep, in the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610, Iron Man and Black Widow are an item. But what's worse, Black Widow turns out to be working as a double agent and betrays the team in Ultimates 2. Turns out she was working with the Liberators. This all happens just as Tony and Natasha are preparing to tie the knot. Fortunately, Tony is able to apprehend Natasha, stop her, and turn her over to the authorities, but not before she manages to kill his longtime butler and friend Jarvis, and get all of Hawkeye's family killed and him captured. Tony finds himself distraught, and matters are made even worse after Black Widow's capture and later on her death, when a very intimate and personal video the two made together is leaked to the public. Yikes. Number 9. Actual Cannibal Hulk. Hulk in the Ultimate Universe was a much more gruesome version of himself. He was depicted as being a lot more violent, even killing people when he went into a rage. However, this is the Ultimate, so even this more violent and uncontrolled take on his character was not enough. Hulk wouldn't just lose control and kill people, he also had a habit of eating the people he killed as well. I mean, I know he's meant to be a monstrous figure even on Earth 616, but it feels like they took it a little too far here. Also, what's up with the Ultimate Universe and cannibalism? That's like a thing that just keeps coming up. Number 8, the one true enemy of the great Charles Xavier. Stairs! It was something that hadn't really been done when it came to defeating Professor X, throwing him down some stairs. But there was also probably a reason for this, because I mean, it's just not a thing that needs to happen in the comics, and yet nothing was considered off the table in Ultimates. This is the moment, by the way, that is featured in our thumbnail for this video, and you might be wondering, hold on, wait a minute, is that Wolverine throwing Charles down the stairs? And fear not, true believer, at least they didn't steep that low. That's actually Mr. Sinister, and yeah, he looks a little different in the Ultimate Universe. If you're like, but where's his cape and the things? And it looks different here. Number 7, Liberators. Okay, so don't get me wrong. I like the idea of the Liberators. It was more the way that this all went down with them in the end, and the way that these international heroes, but villains to the Ultimates, were portrayed. The Liberators were a team of superpowered folks from around the globe who had come together to defeat the Ultimates so as to even the playing field on a global level for the rest of the world. Basically, these characters thought that the USA was becoming too powerful and was messing things up for other countries with their superhero team. This could have been an interesting story, actually, in terms of like global international politics, but instead it just became about how every other country was inferior to the US, with their heroes, the Ultimates, winning the day simply because they were kind of deemed superior. And I'm pretty sure there's a line in there that communicates almost verbatim that sentiment. Number 6, Black Panther is Steve Rogers? There is a time that Black Panther is Steve Rogers in these comics. What went down is that basically Black Panther was recruited to the Ultimates but didn't really want to join the team. I mean, that's a whole other story that is pretty weird and problematic. He was kind of made to join the team against his will. On Nick Fury's orders, Black Panther, however, was also not allowed to leave or ever return to his home and see his family in Wakanda. Steve had been training Black Panther and he felt bad for T'Challa, so he decided to basically take Black Panther's place so that he could return home to visit his family. Temporarily, of course. At least, it seemed as though the sub-in was meant to be something temporary. It was implied in the comics that Black Panther would basically go visit his family for a while, and then he'd return to relieve Steve. That isn't what happened, though, and instead Steve remained as Black Panther until eventually he just went back to being Captain America again, and Black Panther sort of seemingly disappeared off the team without any explanation. He does come back, I think, for one mission, and then he quits. But, yeah, it's also kind of weird that he quits. I guess things changed and he could quit at that point? Yeah, it's strange. Another one of the strangest moments in terms of this story is when Janet Van Dyne, the Wasp, seemingly recognizes that Steve is actually Black Panther because of the way he moves. Apparently no one else can move like Steve Rogers. Number 5, Blob eats the Wasp. During the events of Ultimatum, a lot of awful things went down. One of those things was the death of the Wasp, Janet Van Dyne. She was for a time the leader of the Ultimates and actually proved to be a quite capable, resourceful, and powerful member of the team, but none of that could save her from the Ultimate Wave. Janet was one of the heroes to be killed during the Ultimate Wave, and her body was found by Hawkeye and Giant Man. The worst part wasn't even that she died, but instead was the aftermath of that. Hawkeye and Giant Man found the Wasp's corpse, which was being violently torn apart and eaten by the Brotherhood member, the Blob. Ew. Why so much cannibalism, though? Number 4, Magneto kills everyone. Normally, I wouldn't have a problem with Magneto killing people. After all, he's a major X-Men villain, and to have Magneto tell the story, most of the people that he kills, they deserve it. They themselves are usually murderers in some way. It's what makes him such a compelling villain, and at times an anti-hero. Right now, he's gone full hero in the comics, which means that he really holds people up to high standards in Krakoa when it comes to their law about not killing humans. After all, he knows what it's like to feel justified in disposing of human enemies, and even he is willing to agree that overall it's just a bad idea. So there's really no way of finding justification if that's your crime in Krakoa right now. In Ultimates, Magneto, however, goes from being Professor X's friend and partner in mutant team building and safe space creating to thinking that mutants are basically better than humans and believing that humans should either serve mutants or completely be exterminated. Does believing that you belong to a superior race sound like anything else to you? Magneto kills billions of people in the pursuit of this belief, which, considering his history as a victim and survivor of the camps in World War II, is pretty shocking and feels out of character. And if you're wondering, well, is that still a thing in Ultimates? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's still established in Ultimates, so yeah. Number 3, Wanda and Pietro. Initially, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver had a similar relationship to their 616 counterparts, with Pietro being established as just an overprotective brother. Ultimates then took this a step further, with it being kind of a joke that they were maybe like a little too close, with them even being presented as being overly flirty with one another. But eventually, this was then taken to the next level. A level we probably never should have gone to, where the brother and sister duo were in a full-blown romantic and intimate relationship with one another, and Wolverine even caught them being intimate. And this was something that many fans felt was taking their relationship way too far. Pietro even is considered a rival when it comes to anyone else competing for Wanda's affections. I love how Earth 1610 was about trying completely different things with characters, and yet the close siblings were simply just like brought too close together. I mean, they could have done something really different with these two and made them like two estranged siblings or people that were like unrelated to each other. That's something that would really be breaking new ground. Like, where's my story where they were like split up at birth and so they like never knew about the other one and then they find their long lost twin? That could be a cool story. Number 2, Ultimates 3. Many of these worst moments that have been laid out before you today come to us from Ultimates 3, which is where the wheels really began to fall off the Ultimates train. I mean, Ultimates 2 also had its problems, but I don't know if there were quite as many as Ultimates 3. Ultimates would later be relaunched by Jonathan Hickman and Asad Ribish in hope to save it, but the damage had already been done. The line was doomed to die and would die during the incursions, with the worlds colliding and being rolled into one giant ball of fun that we'd come to know as Doom's Battle World. Of course, then later it'd be brought back, so nah. Number 1, Ultimatum. What could possibly be worse than a brother and sister in a romantic relationship and Ultimates 3, where many problematic stories either got worse or got started? How about the thing that simply straight up killed the Ultimate Universe, or at least felt like it tried to? Ultimatum. Ultimatum was the crossover event that caused mass devastation to the universe and the world, wiping out many of the characters that we'd come to know and love, or at the very least tolerate. Jeff Loeb was basically given the green light by Marvel to kill off all characters who were too similar to their Earth 616 counterparts to really shake up the Ultimate Universe. What ended up happening as a result was many people, heroes, and villains dying due to their heads being blown up or torn off, having an overly gruesome and violent end. Then there were deaths that were never even shown of major characters who died in the Ultimate Wave. And finally, there were also tons of characters whose corpses were eaten after or during their death, or who ended up tortured to death. It was just an overly violent mess of an event with death after death, till you became just basically numb to what was going on. Ultimatum is also the event where Magneto decided to basically go nuts and kill billions of people. He would snap Professor X's neck, and then would later have his own head blown off by Cyclops' optic blasts. Like I said, just so many heads being blown off.
We're looking at an alternate Earth that is probably one of the most obvious ways to change things up. Earth 8311, also known as Larval Earth, is home to anthropomorphic animal superheroes. There are no humans here. Instead, this universe has what is called an anthropomorphic field that has an effect on animals, changing them into humanoid versions of themselves with the ability to speak. This happened to one of the inhuman Lockjaw's siblings. Her name was Doc Jaw. She was taken in by Mr. Fantastic, and yes, that's Mr. Fantastic, as a moose, and he trained her to become a pretty accomplished scientist. But she is far from the only animal to make a name for themselves here. Arguably, the most well-known of larval Earth's denizens would be Peter Porker, aka Spider-Ham. But others include Daredevil, Nick Fury, the Agents of Sheep, and the one that caught me off guard the most, Black Panda. On the villainous side of things, we have Magsquito, Sand Manatee, and Kangaroo the Conqueror, which is just fantastic. Now, following the events of the superhuman civil war, people were a little bummed out. Understandably so. That little conflict didn't end in laughs, shaking hands, and happy smiles. It ended in tears, broken friendships, and fallen allies. So, naturally, Reed Richards can't just accept reality for what it is, and he goes searching for alternate Earths where things didn't go so badly in Dark Reign Fantastic Four #2 from April of 2009. But of course, things go south. A power outage causes Reed's machine to go a little off the chain. In an alternate timeline created by the machine, Susan Storm, the Invisible Woman, rules a medieval world taking the name Queen Storm. Her throne is flanked by her brother Johnny in full plate armor, and the Thing dressed like an aristocrat. She seems to be leading one side of a medieval superhuman civil war. We see Captain America, Iron Fist, Cable, Daredevil, and Luke Cage Power Man as they prepare for a battle with a man with an iron heart who is just outside the castle preparing to attack with his group. Now, before the conflict begins, we get to hear Chamberlain Grimm say his classic line, "Milady, 'tis the clobbering hour," and it's fantastic. But before we can see more, we move to other alternate timelines. In Uncanny X-Men number 153, Kitty Pryde has to tell Colossus's little sister Ileana a bedtime story. So what does she do? She comes up with an adorable little story recasting her friends as pirates, wizards, genies, and for one of my faves, Nightcrawler, Kitty turns him into little tiny nightcrawlers that look eerily like Smurfs that she calls Bamfs. At first, there's just one, and it pops up and immediately falls in love with Kitty before like 10 of the little guys start popping up. But this is a comic book. Why tell a bedtime story when that bedtime story could easily just become a completely different universe that actually exists? Thanks to a mishap in the X-Men's Danger Room, Nightcrawler is transported to another dimension where the characters from Kitty's story, including all the Bamfs, really exist. And that place is Earth 5311. 1979's What If number 14 gives us a very different approach to history. Instead of World War II being fought in Europe, it is instead fought in space. In this alternate timeline, we discovered interstellar travel much earlier in our history, and as such, the World War II we fight is more like space sector war between Sector Alpha and Sector Beta in space, and I do not know where that is. As this is still set at the same general time as the regular World War II, some of the same characters are going to be involved, including the original Nick Fury and his Howling Commandos. This story has new high-tech weaponry, fishbowl helmets, and aliens, and it's just a good bit of fun. Now, we learn in the story that Admiral Von Strucker is actually working with the alien Axis powers to create a master race, so it seems that even in this alternate world where we can master interstellar travel, we can't really just figure out racism. Now, in the alternate reality of AD 3167, which appeared in Extraordinary X-Men number 11 from June 2016, Apocalypse showed up in the 21st century, bringing with him the Great Trials. Now, this event saw the end of entire civilizations and races on Earth and left only the Atlanteans, the Inhumans, an AI race known as the Stark Self, the Wakandans, the Mystics, and the Maloids. And they all lived under Apocalypse's rule on Omega World. This was a huge structure composed of bubble worlds that preserved what little remained of Earth after Apocalypse's ascension. The part that will blow your mind is that Omega World itself, the entire structure, is Apocalypse. He still had a human form, and that essentially functioned as the Omega World's heart, keeping the whole place functional. At the same time, his horsemen functioned as like Omega World's antibodies, being sent out to cleanse the structure of anything that could harm their master. The mutant Colossus and a bunch of young mutants were transported here, where Colossus was captured and became another of Apocalypse's horsemen. Apocalypse was now after an ark being held by the mutant kids that contained thousands of mutant embryos. He should have left it all alone though, because it got him a good old sword in the back by the end of the story. That doesn't matter though, because the world is cool. Taking place on Earth 97161, Simon Walterson was a pretty killer football player whose career came crashing down due to a knee injury. Simon found the love of his life, married her, had a kid, and then they both passed away. But wait, it gets even worse. Simon got himself cursed by a witch after he wasn't able to pay her for connecting him with his wife and child in the afterlife. Now this curse turned Simon from a strapping man into a frog. Simon luckily found himself being accepted into a frog clan that lived in Central Park, and Simon took on the frog name of Puddlegup. Now, Puddlegup managed to assist the god of thunder Thor in a war between rats and frogs. After the fight, a piece of Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, was broken off, and Puddlegup was able to lift the sliver of hammer, which then transformed into a miniature version of Thor's hammer, and it turned Puddlegup into the mighty Throg, a frog with the powers of Thor. This world is the home of the Pet Avengers, a group of animals who belong to or are related in some way to various superheroes and who manage to form together as a team. Fantastic. Neil Gaiman's Marvel 1602 is one of my favorite comic book stories, but I will admit it can be a little weird. Basically, to lay it out, the universe the story takes place in, Earth 311, actually got its start in a different alternate reality. On Earth 460, Purple Man had used his powers of persuasion to become president for life. In that world, most heroes had been hunted down or had died from old age, but Captain America was one holdout. Unfortunately, he is captured and banished away to Earth 616's 1599. But because he showed up in the world, it inadvertently, and for some reason, created an entirely different alternate timeline known as Earth 311. For some reason, the presence of Captain America destabilized reality and began the emergence of heroes and villains into this world who are counterparts to many of the present day heroes and villains of the Marvel Universe that we are used to. Characters like Count Otto Von Doom the Handsome, Witchbreed, who are actually mutants, Four from the Fantastic, Sir Nicholas Fury, David Banner, all these guys. These are some of the alternate versions of these characters. The story is so interesting, intertwining actual history with superpowered beings, but it's not without its confusing moments, and most of that has to do with how this story's world even came to be in the first place. While originally a crossover advertisement deal between Marvel Comics and Hostess, you know, the company that owns Twinkies, Snowballs, and those cupcake snack pastries, the Spider-Man of Earth 51914 is an official member of the Spider-Verse, being defeated by Morlun in the first Spider-Verse comic in 2014. But Morlun has defeated many spider totems, it's his whole thing. This Spider-Man is still more powerful than you may think. This sweet Spider-Man has all the same powers as our 616 spider-based hero, only has the added benefit of using Hostess snacks as equipment, whether it be to distract, lure, or even reason with criminals, and it even got him out of tight spots in his relationships. Like when he gave Mary Jane a cupcake so that he could slip away to fight crime. The power of sweet pastries should not be undervalued. Now, using his pastry-based equipment, he was able to defeat the Fly, Printout Man, Simon the Evil Swami, Madam Web, Legal Eagle, and an unnamed jewel thief. So yeah, it's not just a sponsor, it's an actual added ability that puts him a cut above. Unfortunately, this all happened before Morlun showed up and sucked out Hosty Spidey's life force, which was apparently quite sweet. Marvel Max was a 2001 imprint for Marvel that focused on more mature adult stories. As a result, the books were pretty over the top, and that was really their selling factor. But some were just incredibly weird, like the Eternal Max. Essentially, the Eternal Max follows the Eternals, but other than being the immortal servants of the Celestials, these guys are quite different. Taking place just before the dawn of mankind, the Eternals had been serving the Celestials for thousands of years, traveling from planet to mine resources. When the Eternals arrive on a planet, they genetically modify some of the local intelligent life into artificial Eternals, which they call deviants, and they use them as manual labor to make the job easier. When they arrive on Earth though, they do the same thing, turning the proto-humans into deviants. But these deviants are shockingly similar to the Eternals, who are also shockingly similar to us. Now, in the past, the Celestials wiped out every single one of the female Eternals in order to force the male Eternals into servitude. So when these new deviants are created, the male Eternals get all googly-eyed for the female deviants. A large number of the Eternals go against the rules and teach the deviants how to communicate, and they begin to to procreate with them. This leads to essentially a mini civil war among the Eternals between their leader Ikedan and the second in command, Crassus. It all leads into the Eternals and these deviants basically becoming the first real humans on Earth. At least, that's kind of how I interpreted it. If you are over the age of 18, definitely give it a read because it is really interesting, but also very mature. And finally, if you have never read Marvel, just prepare yourself. This comic kind of just goes and doesn't really stop. The entire thing is satire, but like, not good satire like at all. There's even a page in each issue dedicated to explaining the jokes, and the story itself barely has any kind of actual plot. It's just, well, it was all part of a bet. In 2002, Bill Jemas was vice president at Marvel Comics. He got into an argument with Peter David, and the two of them made a bet. Each would write a comic book starting from issue number 1 to see whose comic could sell more copies. Peter started Captain Marvel, and Bill started Marvel. Marvel features a Superman parody named Kal-AOL, who is the son of Ted Turner and Jane Fonda. It features a farting dog, a racist Iron Man, a farting Rush Limbaugh, scantily clad women for no reason, time travel for no reason, a person who may or may not be God, duckbill dinosaurs that talk, rants about how evolution is fake, and then, what is probably the highlight of the comic, they grab a Jurassic otter, and as they move closer to the modern day, that otter not only evolves to become Wolverine, but that otter Wolverine is also the father of the entire human race.
Number 10. Earth 90213. There are tons of scary alternate universes for Peter, which isn't surprising given all the trauma he's already been through in the main continuity of Earth 616, and how frequently it seems things could have gone even more wrong or sideways in his life. In the reality of Earth 90213 from the comic What If Spider-Man Back in Black, we get to see just how much worse things could have gotten for Peter if Aunt May wasn't accidentally targeted by Kingpin's hitmen, but instead Mary Jane stepped into their crosshairs. However, unlike May, MJ doesn't end up in critical care, she just straight up dies. This sets Peter down a path of darkness, where instead of just badly beating and terrifying Kingpin while May's life is on the line, Spider-Man is actually focused on killing him. Aunt May tries to beg Peter to think about what Mary Jane would have wanted and not to pursue the man responsible, but he is blinded by rage. In the end, he succeeds in killing Kingpin and is arrested by Iron Man and the authorities and taken to prison. For his part, Peter blames the whole thing on Iron Man, who in this reality he's still unmasked for, in order to show solidarity for Iron Man's Superhero Registration Act. Number 9. My Little Thanos. This feels like a weird one to have on this list, but I think it is both terrifying and adorable, which is a unique combination of descriptors for a story, so I thought I would share it with you. Also, I just really like it. My Little Thanos is another tale likely from an alternate timeline featured in the Thanos Annual from 2018. Back on part 1, Connor talked about the Thanos wins reality from the second arc of the main story of that comic, and on my part 2, I talked about another alternate timeline story from this annual. The annual is a really fun read and a good standalone collection of just short Thanos tales outside of continuity, so whether or not you pick up the main series, I would really recommend reading this issue at least. Just read the annual, even if you don't want to read the whole series. It's great, it's fantastic. In My Little Thanos, Thanos visits an adorable world of cute little beings known as the Adorals. Noticing how bright their world shines, he attempts to get whatever source of power they have that causes such an effect. You know Thanos, he's all about power. The Adorals in general are just enthusiastic about everything, including being subjugated by their new god Thanos. They happily murder themselves and one another at his behest, and get him the artifact that they worship. It turns out it's just a heart that makes a squeaky sound when you squeeze it. It's a very disturbing but delightful world. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn about even more scary alternate Marvel universes, I'm pretty sure we could just keep going forever. There's a lot of them. So be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Limbo. Limbo is the dimension and reality where Magic, aka Ilyana Rasputin, was held as a prisoner when she was young. She was kidnapped by the evil Belasco, who sought to use her to harness her power and also to turn her into a sort of protege for his own dastardly means. In the end, Magic ended up escaping her captor and even rising up against him and taking Limbo Limbo for herself, defeating Belasco. While Magic has her own dark side, known as Dark Child, it is because of her alignment as a hero that I am ranking Limbo a little lower than I might otherwise. Magic, you see, tends to rule over Limbo, and you know, she's pretty inherently good overall. Still, Limbo is basically a hell dimension on its own, so it's still a pretty scary alternate reality to visit. Unless you have Magic with you and on your side. And even then, I imagine it would still be like a little bit scary, a little bit traumatizing, at least. Just cause like demons and such. Number 7, Earth 21619. The Earth of 21619 takes the idea of Peter becoming a killer of villains even farther. In the Back in Black What If, Peter feels as though he is somewhat justified as Kingpin was the one who took Mary Jane from him. He was pushed to the breaking point by her death, basically. However, on the Earth of 21619, which is the reality number given to the universe that we see in the Chip Zdarsky and Phil Noto series, Spider-Man Spider Shadow, it is Spider-Man's union with Venom that brings out a darkness within him, and sets him on a path where he is killing multiple villains, taking a new approach to crime fighting as he falls deeper and deeper into the darkness that the symbiote unleashes from within. What happens with Peter also inevitably leads to another hero taking on and bonding with the symbiote later in the miniseries, and also having to face even more deadly consequences as a result of that bond. Number 6, Earth 70134. In this reality, things went down a little differently when it comes to the Spider-Man story known as The Other. Instead of embracing and accepting the spider totem within, Peter decides to reject it. Peter would rather not be resurrected than return more spider than man here. However, the spider totem wasn't the only one hoping to forge a special and permanent connection with Peter. Out in the world, Venom senses that Peter is in his cocoon and now vulnerable with the spider totem rejected and dead. The symbiote leaves its current host, Matt Gargan, in hopes of bonding with Peter, and guess what? It's successful. What is born from the union is a monster who calls themselves Poison. No longer is Spider-Man alive. Instead, we have Poison in his place. Poison attempts to get Mary Jane to agree to be its partner and kind of its bride, but when she refuses the offer, they decide to dig up Gwen's corpse instead. Spooky stuff. Number 5, Dark Dimension. The Dark Dimension is on a whole other scale when it comes to dark, dangerous, and straight up scary alternate worlds. It is the home of the Dreadlord Dormammu, a notorious Doctor Strange villain. The other horrifying thing about this reality is that Dormammu, while residing there, becomes insanely powerful, as this is basically what fuels his own abilities, his magics, and his powers. So he is at his most powerful while in the Dark Dimension, which is also why he's probably the ruler of it, and probably also why you definitely don't want to go there if Dormammu is there. The Dark Dimension is filled with hellish landscapes, but also mind-melting, trippy ones as well. So it's not just a physical hellish reality, it's also a sort of mental and metaphysical one too. Number 4, Earth 14850. This is the reality belonging to the What If story Wolverine, Enemy of the State. In this version of the well-known Wolverine tale, Logan finds himself brainwashed by Weapon X, but as opposed to becoming free of their control, as happens in 616, he is unable to be saved. His friends and fellow heroes attempt to band together to stop Wolverine by neutralizing him and saving him instead of killing him. In the end, however, this just results in many of their own painful deaths. In the end, it is up to his good friend and student, Kitty Pryde, to save Wolverine, but of course by killing him, as that's really the only way left to deal with Wolverine at this point. In the process, Kitty loses her arm and is only able to save him by phasing her hand through his head and then making it solid while passing through Wolverine's brain. Number 3, Earth 811. Days of Future Past, all in all, is pretty hellish, and it's not even a hell dimension. In the reality of 811, we get to see what would happen if the Sentinels actually succeeded in conquering North America. Not only do they pretty much wipe out almost all mutants and superpowered beings, but the Sentinels also end up enslaving all of humanity for their own good, as they see it. The Sentinels decide who gets to breed and who doesn't, marking all citizens with lettered tattoos to denote if they are human, mutant, or basically are humans with like mutant potential. Mutants are kept in camps to serve the Sentinels, and even worse, the Sentinels seem to be planning to take over the entire world, which would inevitably start a nuclear war that would destroy the planet. Number 2, Hell. Technically, Hell is its own reality here in the Marvel multiverse. It is often the name given to Mephisto's reality or realm, who is seen kinda like the Marvel Universe's devil. He claims to be their version of Satan, at least, although a few other powerful demons and entities have also attempted to claim that title as well, including Damon Hellstrom's father and Azazel, Nightcrawler's dad. Mephisto's realm is actually made up of various hellish realms and death dimensions. It typically is shown to look like a fiery, hot, or cavernous style landscape. What you typically think of when you think of the traditional stereotypical hell of Western Christianity. Number 1. What if Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands? What if Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands is the title of the 4th episode of Season 1 of Disney Plus's streaming animated series What If. Possibly one of the darkest episodes of all, allows us to see what would happen were Doctor Strange to have lost his love Christine instead of his hands. In this case, Doctor Strange chooses not to let go of the possibility that he might get Christine back, despite the fact that the Ancient One appears and tells him that Christine's death is actually part of an absolute point in time, which basically can't be altered without risking, well, the fate of the universe. Strange changes his own history, going down a dark path to try and find a way to get enough power to bring Christine back. Finally able to do so, just as the Ancient One warned, this does cause the destruction of the very universe that this Strange hails from.
Number 10. Avengers 1 million BC, Earth 616. Alright, look, I promise this is the only Earth 616 story I'm mentioning, but given the team and the story, how can I not? The Avengers of 1 million BC came together in the prehistoric era to face Zagreb the Aspirant, basically a mad celestial. The team was made up of Odin Bor's son, wielding Mjolnir, the mutant Firehair, the avatar of the Phoenix Force, the sorcerer Agamotto, like the Eye of Agamotto, that guy, Fan Fei the Iron Fist, the first ever Black Panther of the Panther tribe, a mammoth riding Ghost Rider, and Starbrand. They first appeared in Marvel Legacy number 1 in 2017, and I'm not even going to explain the rest, just go read it, please! Earth 76611, alternate history. In Fantastic Four Annual number 11 in 1976, Power Man knocked a vibranium cylinder into Mr. Fantastic's time platform, sending it back in time. The cylinder was split in 2 halves. The important to this topic half landed in occupied France in 1942 and created an alternate branching timeline, Earth 76611. In this alternate timeline, the socialist Germans used the vibranium to advance their war effort, successfully invading England in 1943 and even making it to Manhattan by 1944, taking over America by 1946. That's what half a cylinder of vibranium can do, apparently. The Fantastic Four realized what happened though, and through some confusing tomfoolery, they managed to prevent this timeline from replacing the Earth 616 timeline. Number 8. Earth 9591, Ruins. This alternate reality is going to be the most recent one, taking place in the 90s. The timing of this one doesn't factor so much into its story though, as the more relevant detail is that this is the universe where literally everything goes wrong. The entire Fantastic Four, except Ben Grimm, who was replaced by Victor Von Doom, died on their test flight. The X-Men are held in a prison in Texas where they are horribly disfigured to stop them from using their powers. Peter Parker's spider bite caused an infectious rash that mutated his entire body and caused his hair to fall out. Bruce Banner becomes a monstrous mass of tumors. The Avengers all died in a rebellion. The Silver Surfer went mad, wanting to know what it was like to breathe air again. Nick Fury became a cannibal. All sort of that really lovely stuff, you know? I would not read this story unless you're okay with being upset, but I would read this story because it's good and it's interesting. Number 7. Earth 6799, 1967 Spider-Man cartoon. Bouncing off that happy little lovely tale, we have Earth 6799, or just Earth 67, which is actually the Earth where the 1967 Spider-Man takes place. Because of that, this Earth technically first appeared in Spider-Man Episode 1 Season 1 on September 9th, 1967. Its comic book appearance first comes in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3, number 9, as one of the many alternate Spider-Man featured in this story. He also shows up in Spider-Verse Team-Up issue number 2 when Miles Morales and Peter Parker come to this Earth to find Spider-Man and recruit him to the fight against the Inheritors. It's super entertaining. Number 6. Earth 84243, Conan in the modern day's 70s. Some people may not know this, but Conan the Barbarian is actually part of Marvel Comics. And while the era he lived in, the Hyborian Age, is part of the 616 continuity, the What If story on Earth 79213 isn't. Instead of being in the Hyborian Age though, our boy Conan gets stuck in the 20th century. After visiting the Hyborian trade city of Akbitana, he is captured by a wizard who specializes in time travel. And instead of escaping, he is transported to Manhattan on July 13th, 1977. What does he decide to do with himself? Well, after scaring off some punks and throwing an old lady in a trash can, he has a romantic encounter with a modern age lady, Danette, who shows him the Guggenheim Museum, which reminds him of an ancient citadel, and they go to investigate. Here, he fights off some muggers and then gets struck by magical lightning that transports him back through time to his Hyborian age. But at least he got to keep Danette's cap as a reminder of their romance. Number 5. Earth 15513, 1872. Technically, Earth 15513 is Battleworld, which is actually part of the modern Secret Wars story. The pocket dimension of the Valley of Doom is made of another Earth's version of the Wild West, mainly the town of Timely. Timely is run by its mayor, Wilson Fisk, and his enforcers, who ultimately answer to Governor Roxxon. Stephen Rogers is the sheriff in this here town, and he's a bitter but just man after the death of his deputy, Bucky Barnes. Anthony Stark is the town drunk, regretful of how his weapons were used in the Civil War. Natasha Romanoff is the widow of Bucky, with Bruce Banner being the doctor of the town. The new hero, Red Wolf, tries blowing up the Roxxon Dam, which almost results in his lynching, if it weren't for Sheriff Stephen Rogers, who saves him. Conflict blossoms when the agents of Roxxon, Bullseye, Grizzly, Elektra, and Dr. Octopus arrive in town and start running amok. Another story you have to read. I promise the steampunk-looking Iron Man will not disappoint you. Number 4, Earth 717, Captain America in the Civil War. The what if stories are so cool. And what if Captain America, Stephen Rogers, actually fought in the American Civil War instead of World War II as General America, given powers from an ancient Native American eagle that also turned an evil racist Bucky Barnes into the White Skull, who became the leader of a white supremacist group. Because of General America's involvement in the Civil War, the Union won the war a year earlier than it normally would have. Abraham Lincoln survived his second term in office. He helped rebuild the South, suppressed the rise of a certain group of hooded racists, and prevented the Indian Wars from ever happening. He would go on to fight the White Skull and his new, deadlier hate group, eventually being succeeded by a line of Captain Americas who were his descendants. Well, hey there, time traveler. You're from the time period where YouTube still lets you like and subscribe, right? Well, if you're enjoying this video right here, why don't you just go and hit that thumbs up? It sure helps us out a lot. Alrighty, let's get on to the top 3. Number 3, Earth 90214, Marvel Noir. In this alternate version of Earth, superheroes debuted in the 1920s and 30s instead of their normal timing. This Earth 90214 brought us Marvel Noir, with subsequent noir versions of Punisher, Wolverine, Iron Man, Daredevil, Luke Cage, the X-Men, and most famously, Spider-Man. Each story is a fresh, unique, and awesome take on each character, seeing how superpowers in this world are pretty much non-existent except for a few characters. For example, Spider-Man was bitten by a spider, but instead of being based in science, his powers derived from a spider god. Or Wolverine didn't actually have claws, he just carries like brass knuckle blade things. Another example would be the X-Men, who are actually a group of sociopathic criminals, led by an Xavier who believed sociopathy was the future of the human species, which is just incredible. Number 2, Earth 811, Days of Future Past. Earth 811 is a future timeline where Sentinels rule over North America. After their creation, almost all mutants have been hunted and exterminated. The mutants that were not killed are kept in concentration camps. Even the heroes who aren't mutants have been exterminated. The Avengers, the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Daredevil, they're all gone. But hey, this is the future, not the past. Yeah, I'm getting there, okay? Rachel Summers, the daughter of Jean Grey and Scott Summers, uses her telepathic powers to send Kitty Pryde's mind back into her younger self's body. Specifically, Kitty's mind went all the way back to the Halloween of 1980, where she informed the X-Men of what their future could become. and they prevented the assassination of Robert Kelly. The story is a whole lot more complex than that, and is also one of the most prized Marvel stories, so give it a read! Number 1. Earth 311, Marvel 1602. Okay, Marvel 1602 is my absolute favorite Marvel alternate universe. Fun fact, it was the first Marvel writing escapade for superstar fantasy writer Neil Gaiman. The universe actually got its start in a different alternate reality, Earth 460, where Purple Man became president for life. Most heroes had been hunted down or had died from old age, but after Captain America is captured, he is banished away to Earth 616's 1599, shortly before Roanoke was formed, which inadvertently created Earth 311. For some reason, the presence of Captain America destabilized reality and began the emergence of heroes and villains into this world who are counterparts to many of the present-day heroes and villains of the Marvel Universe. Count Otto von Doom the Handsome, Witchbreed, which are mutants, Grand Inquisitor Enrique, which is Magneto, Carlos Xavier, which is Charles Xavier, Four from the Fantastic, Sir Nicholas Fury, Peter Parquois, David Banner. The story is so interesting, intertwining actual history with superpowered beings. I highly recommend you give it a read if you haven't already.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Captain America, created by Eric Larson. The end of Captain America is pretty stressful. He's older and a little rough around the edges, and although the Red Skull is long gone, we now have to deal with a virus. Rings familiar bells? Yeah, this one hit a little close to home. So the worldwide virus is a Red Skull virus, and it spreads easily, like really easily. Like you can smell somebody or be close to them, and then bam, now you're a Red Skull looking maniac who wants to break shit and infect more people. Cap then finds a group of survivors in the basement of a broken down building, but of course the Red Skull gang comes in and there's only 3 safe people left. An old man and 2 children. One of them actually got shot and Cap had to save her life by giving her a blood transfusion. Good old Cap. Cap then travels with his new friends and finds the Avengers helicarrier, and inside we see the reason behind this crazy controlled Red Skull copies. And it's MODOK the whole time. So Cap puts a shield into his face and kills him, bam bam. Now you would think that's the end of that, and that's the final act to save everybody. Nope, the world is still infected and they want to infect others if they can, and kill if they can't. So using just a piece of shrapnel stuck in his leg, he fights them all off long enough to realize the cure is him. The cure is his blood. That's why the little girl he saved is able to stay safe. So the pages end with Cap being the world's best blood donor, and slowly but surely things go back to normal. So maybe the best way to get through this current pandemic lies in Chris Evans' blood. Maybe, I don't know. Somebody shoot him a message on Twitter. What's his blood type? Let's figure this out. And before we go on to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and give us a thumbs up, because it helps us out a lot here at the studio. You guys are the best. Now back to some more dark ends. Number 9, Fantastic Four. While some ends are dark and lonesome, like the Hulk or others, there are a handful that end on a rather hopeful note, like that Captain America one we just read, and even Fantastic Four: The End. So the 6-parter written by Alan Davis begins with the death of Franklin and Valeria. Dark start, okay, it's a pretty dark start, and then the team is left to deal with a returned Doctor Doom. So the story offers a lot of fan service, and some say it's actually a beautiful tribute to their comic book history. Many have said that this is a new beginning rather than the end story, which fits the tone of the Fantastic Four quite well. It draws attention to a future Fantastic Four coming back together from doing their own adventures to reunite as a team. Number 8, X-Men Volume 1. So there are 3 different X-Men The End comics, so I'll start her off, of course, with Volume 1, titled Dreamers and Demons. Written by Chris Claremont and art from Sean Chen, there are 18 issues in this series in total. Now, Chris Claremont's run on the X-Men from 1975 to 1991, fans have talked about a lot. Some even argue that that was the best run to date. So there was hype behind this end story. The verdict? Confusing, but interesting to most. It's a great start to this trilogy, full of callbacks, and while one would guess that the start of this miniseries would be another future that's dark and everything has gone to shit, but with Dreamers and Demons, the volume starts with mutants in a world where it's actually looking to be a better place. And for our mutants, well, Jubilee is a film director, Kurt Wagner is an actor, and Kitty Pryde is running to become the mayor of Chicago. Scott and Emma are married. There's a lot of good going on. The main plot in here is that the X-Men have to protect the world from Shi'ar. So there's a lot going on in the first 6 issues, but it only gets better. With number 7, X-Men Volume 2. As you could have guessed, the next 6 issues titled Heroes and Martyrs picks up after the attack on the mansion. So war had just been declared on the X-Men, and in usual Claremont fashion, we have twists and twists and twists. Heroes and Martyrs dives into the X-Men's past, it revisits their history, and really dives in the backstory of Gambit and Mr. Sinister. So fans have compared the hero's journey of Aaliyah in this to Luke Skywalker in a way. So the way she searches for adventure, and she has a pretty good crew to guide her as well. She has Jean Grey keeping her company, plus the consciousness of Carol Danvers driving the Starjammer. Not to mention we also have to deal with War Scrolls now, which are just amazing. Super fun. And number 6, X-Men Volume 3. And lastly, the third X-Men The End book titled Men and X-Men, which is just a mouthful. Chris Claremont brings a close to this massive story. Men and X-Men was reviewed as mostly a mess. See, by this point, it's clear that Kitty Pryde is the center of attention in this whole ordeal. So she ends up being the narrator at the start of each issue all along. And yes, she even spoke about herself in third person. So the X-Men are going head to head with the Shi'ar, and Kitty is running for election in Chicago. And there's plenty of heroic deaths, with characters of course coming back to life. The Brood is going nuts, and the Phoenix has returned. There's a lot. All of this wrapped into 6 issues. And it's interesting to see how Claremont decides to end the mutants, with a pretty presidential cap to an otherwise mystical Marvel adventure, literally. Number 5, Captain Marvel. Written by Kelly Thompson and brought to life by Carmen Carnero, we find Carol Danvers in the year 2051, just above the planet Nadrelia. She's been away from the Earth for about 50 years when she suddenly gets a call to return. Boom, Avengers assemble. She's super surprised as well. She can't believe that they had survived. On her way to Earth, she picked up some signals when she was close enough. One message saying that they need her on Earth, and then the next saying that they failed, that everything is gone. She arrives and the planet is frozen over. Kind of looks like Canada, not gonna lie. She thought it would be easier to see this many years later, but it still makes her tremble, and she said she hasn't even trembled in years, so it's a big moment. It was a shock. And then she meets the remaining heroes: Danny Cage, Molly Hayes, Fuse, Rogue's daughter Irene. Emma Frost is still around, saying you can't kill Fabulous. Amen, fair. So they need Carol to deal with the giant prehistoric mutated radioactive creature that came from the sea, which she does, and it's of course a blast. But the big problem here is that the sun is dead, or it's awfully close to death, that is. So Carol decides to save the remaining heroes and the planet by restarting the sun. She references how she did something similar with Quasar, so she knew it could work. And the entire one-shot just pulls on your heartstrings, and it's truly a must-read. Number 4, King Thor. Written by Jason Aaron and brought to life by Isad Ribic, we're treated with a lovely conclusion to the Thor God of Thunder series. So last time we saw Thor, he was battling the Butcher of Gods, the wielder of the all-black Necrosword, and now that blade has returned, this time in the hands of Loki. So it starts off quick too. Thor is fighting Loki, and he uses his hammer to ignite a napalm planet, and then in the final page of issue 1, we see the return of Gore. Turns out if you cut somebody's head off and throw the planet into a black hole, it still might not be enough. See, he lived through the sword. So Loki and Thor are now in a heap of trouble, and on top of that you have the secondary plot with Thor's granddaughters, and the way their journey combines with theirs is wonderful. I mean, this is an epic battle. The reviews are mostly, if not all, positive. With the announcement of Christian Bale joining Thor Love and Thunder as Gore, the God Butcher, one could only dream the scale of the excitement comes close to King Thor. Number 3, Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe by Cullen Bunn. So this issue was released August 2012, and just the front cover, you know you're in for a treat. So what's the story here? Why does Wade want everybody in the Marvel Universe dead? Well, it all starts when the X-Men put Wade into the Ravencroft Asylum in attempts to heal his insanity, but of course the Doctor wasn't too good at handling such a task, and also he happened to be Psycho Man, so things went south. So the Doctor actually brainwashed Wade in hopes to shut down all of his inner voices, but it worked. The only downside was those voices were now replaced with voices that were encouraging him to kill everybody in the Marvel Universe. You guessed it. So right off the bat, the series draws you in. It opens with the Fantastic Four facing off against Wade, and it's wild. Reed Richards' face is like melting off. Sue has to watch Deadpool kill Johnny, and then she dies, and then that's just in the first few pages. And then of course the Watcher ends up taking us back to the beginning, how it all started with Dr. Psycho and all that mess. And it's honestly a really fun run, not for the faint of heart, but easily makes our list here as well. Number 2, Future Imperfect. Written by Peter David with the illustrations of George Perez, this 2-part adventure gets dark. Seeing our heroes grow up on the screen and on the page is a wonderful thing, usually. I mean, not all endings are happy, evidently, but what about other characters living out their days? Like the Hulk, for example. Making his first appearance in a vision in the Incredible Hulk Volume 2, Issue 401, the Maestro is the main antagonist in the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect story. So the story takes place about 100 years in the future after a nuclear war put the planet close to extinction. An alternate future version of the Hulk, Maestro, had been absorbing all this nuclear radiation this entire time, and he ended up becoming the most strongest thing on the planet in the meantime. Massive increases in strength and anger, plus the brains of Banner made him arguably unstoppable. And it's terrifying. If you want to see a proper Hulk vs. Hulk showdown, Hulk Future Imperfect is perfect for you. And finally, number 1, Secret Wars 2015. Everything dies. That's right, written by Jonathan Hickman, this storyline recalls the original Secret Wars from 1984, and it picks up after the time runs out Avengers storyline ends. So themes of destruction are imminent in this story. The interdimensional incursions have wiped out every dimension one by one, so now we get a collision with the Ultimate Universe and the Marvel Universe, leaving just this single patchwork planet made from the fragments of the broken dimensions called Battleworld. And we get to watch as all our heroes try and piece this thing together one page at a time, with returning characters possibly popping up. With 137 individual comics to read before this event, it's gonna take a while to piece everything together for this massive journey. Plus Doctor Doom salvaging the multiverse and calling himself a god while he pieces together this world, and the fact that the main heroes in this are usually supporting players like Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Doctor Strange, and Black Panther makes for an interesting time. Gives them the chance to shine here, and it's a fabulous read. You must pick it up.
And at 10, Ultimate. The Ultimate Universe is very similar to the normal 616 counterpart. However, there are some differences that certainly make this thing scarier than the main continuity. Captain America is anti-French for some reason. Ultimate Mr. Fantastic is a villain called the Maker. Ultimate Thanos is gold instead of purple. Oh yeah, and Ultimate Magneto is way too dark compared to Prime Magneto. Prime Magneto hates humans, but Ultimate Magneto is like a tyrant in that he considers all humans insects. Ultimate Wolverine is shown to be interested in teenage girls, while Earth 616 Wolverine is more honorable, because sure, okay, Earth 616 Cyclops and Wolverine didn't see eye to eye, but Wolverine would never have killed Cyclops just so that he could sleep with his girl. Yeah, and Wolverine wants to sleep with Jean Grey, a teenager, when Wolverine is in his 30s, at least in the Ultimate Universe. Oh, and there's also a romantic relationship between Wanda and Pietro, which is probably the scariest thing in this reality, on this Earth, and the reason I wanted it on this list. And at 9, Thanos wins. While the heroes of the MCU already received a little bit of a taste of a reality in which Thanos achieved his ultimate goal by erasing half the population of the universe in Avengers Infinity War, there exists a still darker universe where Thanos wins. Determined to finally impress death, Thanos eradicated every living being on planet Earth, including the superheroes and Frank Castle. The former Punisher made deals with both Mephisto and Galactus to find a new life of vengeance as the Cosmic Ghost Rider and stop King Thanos' dark reality from ever happening. As time went by though, the heroes of Earth grew old and weak, but Thanos only grew stronger, his eternal quest to please death leading him to kill almost every living thing in the known galaxy, and becoming the king of what remained in his wake. Nothing. I don't know why you'd want to be king of nothing. Seems pointless in my opinion, and I'm a king, so I feel like my expertise here, but whatever, okay? As long as it's not this universe, I'm fine with it. Oh, and not only that, but knowing that he had to die in order to be with death, King Thanos gave a piece of the Time Stone to his servant, the Rider, and tasked him with going back in time to drag his younger self to the future so that he could be killed by present Thanos. And at 8, Age of Ultron. Ultron 1320 comes from Earth 14622, and What If Age of Ultron number 1, an Earth where, thanks to Wasp dying, Ultron is able to take over the world faster. Ultron was created to be the ultimate AI by Hank Pym, to help the Avengers utilize their function better as a team. But with the untimely death of Pym's wife, Pym went on to create a more brutal version of Ultron, which was to replace the Avengers. But with this, Ultron's sentience began to constantly evolve. He started the eradication of the human race by taking out such threats as the Avengers and the Defenders, while he left Pym alive to watch him suffer. Ultron and his army of Ultron Sentinels then moved to Kola, Russia, so that he could bore himself into the planet's core to create the ultimate version of himself, Ultron 1320. Ultron then had his minions batter and beat Pym unconscious until he woke up to find that he himself had been turned into Ultron 1321. This version of Ultron also invaded other worlds, claiming Earth 62412, 23223, and 81223, but was stopped on Earth 45162. In its 7th Age of Apocalypse, Earth 295 is a reality that was accidentally created by Legion, son of X-Men leader Professor Charles Xavier and Israeli diplomat Gabriel Haller. Legion believed that the only way to bring peace to humans and mutants was to kill Magneto before he could incite the anti-mutant movement. He traveled back to a time when Xavier and Magneto both lived in Israel and were working at a hospital, taking the X-Men Storm, Iceman, Bishop, and Psylocke back with him. Legion tried to stab Magneto with a Psyblade, but Xavier shielded Magneto and was killed instead. By killing his own father, Legion then made his own existence impossible. The Macron Crystal resolved the paradox by restructuring reality. All the X-Men vanished from that reality, and a new reality came into existence. Bishop, already displaced in time, remained, but the chronal backlash fractured his mind. He wandered Earth for nearly 20 years, and then that superpowered fight attracted the attention of Apocalypse, who then basically took over and destroyed everything. In its 6th, Old Man Logan. 50 years later, Logan lives with his wife Maureen and his son Scotty and daughter Jade on a plot of land in Sacramento. What used to be California, but is now part of Hulkland. He requires money to pay his rent to the landlords of his territory, the descendants of Bruce Banner, the Hulk Gang, who are a product of just a whole lot of crap, okay? Just give me a minute. He refuses to sell his children's toys to pay for the rent, understandably, and Logan is shown as a broken old man, refusing to fight anyone and trying to live peacefully. He realizes that he will be unable to pay the rent this month, and that the Hulk Gang will not accept a plea to pay double next month on its own. By the way, the Hulk Gang is a inappropriately and unconsensually conceived group of children of the Hulk and She-Hulk, Bruce's cousin. Yeah. The Hulk Gang arrives the next day to confront Logan on his lack of payment and then violently beat him, even though he was one of the most violent superheroes ever. Though Logan entertains visions of gutting the eldest Hulk brother Otis, he remains calm and just lets the beating happen. Later though, the Hulk Gang kills his family, so Logan goes on to kill the whole Hulk Gang. But it's still a messed up Earth, okay? It is. Halfway through into number 5, Earth X. The entire world has mutated due to the release of the Terrigen mists in the air. The now blind Watcher recruits Aaron Stack to be his eyes and inform him of what's going on Earth. X-51 finds that in this new world where everyone has superhuman abilities, a young man named the Skull is attempting to take over the world, and Captain America and a band of former champions of Earth have rallied together to stop him. But there's more going on here than meets the eye. It is learned that the Celestials have manipulated the people of Earth into being antibodies for a celestial embryo that is growing in the Earth's core. With humanity in a state of mutation that is not destined to happen for another 300 years, the Celestials come to cleanse the human race from the face of the Earth. Only the intervention of Reed Richards, Black Bolt, and Franklin Richards, who is now Galactus, stop the Celestials and destroys the thing growing at the center of the Earth. At the end of the battle, Galactus returns to space, and Reed has giant human torches built around the Earth to burn the Terrigen mists out of the air in an attempt to return humanity back to their former state. In at 4, Ruins. While Marvel was showcasing their best and brightest with Earth 616, Ruins takes a dark and twisted look at an alternate Marvel Earth where everything could have gone wrong, and it does, in the worst possible ways. The various scientific accidents and experiments that created Marvel's heroes went extremely wrong in the Ruins reality, alright? The Fantastic Four died on their test run in space, Bruce Banner was transformed into a living mass of tumors instead of the Hulk, and Peter Parker's spider bite left him with a terrifyingly infectious disease that ultimately ends up killing the narrator of the story in the truly darkest Marvel timeline. However, this is basically how the creators thought the world would be if superheroes were real. It is in essence a combination of Earth 616 and our world, with the idea of what would happen realistically if this was our world being the founding thoughts for the Ruined storylines. And it's hella messed up, but I don't think that in this world Bruce would grow tumors, okay? I think he would just die. Probably from cancer, but still, okay, it's a more realistic version, but a much darker version of the realism. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Earth 666. First appearing in Secret Adventures number 33 from 2012, on Earth 666, everyone in the world is one of the undead, but this isn't Marvel Zombies. I was told not to talk about Marvel Zombies. The living were not endured on this world, nor do they welcome interdimensional police. The Orb of Necromancy was hidden by Brother Voodoo, who put it deep in Shumagorath's ego maze. In the center tower, where an undead celestial was located and who was their god, and with the orb, they planned to spread undeath to all of reality, and it's currently in a unique position, as its population is divided between a variety of subtypes of supernatural creatures. Vampires, werewolves, mummies, among others. The divide between the various groups is social and deeply rooted, with parts of the world being ruled by various factions. However, in this world there is some hope, as the greatest heroes of the various groups are united to protect the world as the Avengers of the Undead. Basically, if Marvel met Supernatural, especially that episode where like there was like the Chicago monster families and it was like a parody of the Mafia, that's what's going on. Especially because Captain America's shield is made of vibranium, not silver. Get it? Cause Cap's a werewolf this time? The alternative to the number 666 in some translations of the Bible is actually 616, the number used for Marvel's Prime Earth, so there you go. But ultimately, in at number 2, Hulk number 3. The world first explored in Hulk number 3 from 2021 is quite an interesting one. Here we meet another Bruce Banner who doesn't actually have a Hulk form. Instead, his Game of Bombs were a success, but the government then took them and then started using them against their enemies, which caused intense radiation that turns those affected into, as the military called them, bio-waste casualties, which in this reality are their own versions of Hulk and She-Hulk, horrifically disfigured for the most part. This Earth's version of Bruce ends up disposing of these Hulks by throwing them into the void, which even he doesn't know where it sends them. Although, if I'm being honest, this kind of reminds me of the Rick Potion number 9 episode of Rick and Morty season 1. You know, like the one where Morty wants to go to the dance with Jessica, but he ends up giving her like a love potion, but it's flu season, and then Rick tries to fix everyone by turning everyone into praying mantises, and then a combination of like a load of different DNAs that was supposed to equal human but doesn't. Yeah, that's kind of how I see these Hulks, but to not such an extreme where Bruce needs to like change worlds. And finally, in at number 1, the Cancerverse. The Cancerverse is a reality where life finally defeated death, with eternal life being fueled by the many-ankled ones. Every living being in this universe was corrupted and turned to their servitude, resulting in a universe-wide living corpse, which means that they aren't zombies, okay, since zombies are undead and nobody in this earth can die. Before the death of Captain Marvel, with no cure or anything to save him, his terminal condition caused such distress among the people who adored him. Across the universe, all the empathetic trauma was sensed by the many-angled ones. They reached out to the dying Marvel to give them one simple truth: even death may die. While Avengers, Defenders, X-Men, Fantastic Four, and other heroes were present for a vigil at his deathbed at this point, Marvel transmuted his closest allies, among them the Avengers, now the Revengers. Despite the opposition of many, including seemingly at least members of the Machine Resistance, the corrupted heroes performed a ritual known as necropsy, sacrificing the avatar of death on the spacecraft sanctuary and consequently annihilating death itself. Yeah.
Number 10. Tech On. In this 2021 storyline, the Red Skull comes into a new power that removes the powers of other heroes. Tony Stark uses his technology to create the Iron Avengers. Captain America, Captain Marvel, Black Panther, Spider-Man, Wolverine, and obviously Iron Man, basically the most popular Avengers, all get Iron Man-like mech suits that they can use to fight against similarly meched up villains. The whole thing was basically a partnership with Bandai Namco to create Avenger-themed mech toys. so it has no numerical Earth number. But who cares? The art is sweet, the idea is original, and the toys are kinda cool. Number 9. Earth 1048. The reality of Earth 1048 is actually the reality seen in the Marvel Spider-Man game that came out on PlayStation, plus its associated comics and novels. Seeing as this game is highly beloved by many Spider-Man fans, including myself, I thought it deserved a mention. The universe first appeared in the Marvel Spider-Man Hostile Takeover novel on August 21st, 2018, which served as a prequel for the events of the game. In case it wasn't clear, this is also the universe featured in Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, and will be the same world in the next entry to the series, Marvel's Spider-Man 2. All the games so far have had fantastic open world versions of Manhattan, some of the best web swinging in a video game so far, tons of alternate reality and original spider suits, and are all really fun. Number 8. Earth 8. First appearing in Spider-Man Volume 2 number 14 in 2017, Earth 8 is a pretty great place. Essentially, it's a possible future of the reality of Earth 65. A utopia where Miles Morales and Gwen Stacy got married and were part of a team called the Amazing Eight, whose members included Spider-Boy and Spider-Girl, Miles and Gwen's kids, Spider-Ham, Penny Parker and her Spider-Mech, Jerry Drew Spider-Man, and an unnamed Spider-Woman that resembled Kraven the Hunter. The Spider-Gwen of Earth 65 came to Earth 8 to ask for the Amazing Eight's help to fight Silk in her reality. Unfortunately, Miles and Gwen were on their second honeymoon, so she only got the Amazing 6 out of 8, but that was enough it seems. Number 7. Earth 2319. Appearing in the New Avengers Volume 3 number 14 in 2014, Earth 2319 is one of the Earths that dealt with the incursions. This Earth had gone through a fourth age of apocalypse, which resulted in the collapse of the Phoenix eggs, which in turn led to Magneto forming the floating twin cities of Tian, where mutants would be safe. The floating cities ended up being the point of an incursion witnessed by the 616 Mr. Fantastic. An Illuminati team was formed on the Earth that consisted of Mr. Fantastic, Doctor Doom, Black Panther, Yellow Jacket, both Captain Britons, Betsy Braddock and Brian Braddock, Iron Man, and Emma Frost. It was basically used as an example of what the Sidera Maris, which are an army of robots created by the mapmakers, could do after they invaded from the incursing Earth, resulting in the eventual destruction of Earth 2319. Number 6. Darkhold Universes. Earth 21129, Earth 42222, Earth 52433, Earth 64211, and Earth 37640. Now, this one point is actually going to cover multiple different alternate Earths in one, because they are all part of the same event. The Darkhold is basically a codex written on flesh by the elder god Chthon of all his evil works and spells. There is a stone transcription and a series of scrolls that act as the same thing. But when the true Darkhold was found by Victorious and Doctor Doom, it opened a pathway between the other world and our world, and awoke Chthon in preparation for the coming conflict and to temper them with madness, which is just the dumbest idea I've ever heard of. Victorious and Scarlet Witch had Iron Man, Blade, Wasp, Black Bolt, and Spider-Man all read from the book. The problem was they read too far, were corrupted, and saw horror story versions of their lives, resulting in 5 alternate realities and 5 2021 stories you need to read. Number 5. Earth TRN 891, Dark Ages. In the alternate Earth TRN 891, after a battle with an ancient, powerful, galaxy-attacking robot that was trapped inside the Earth billions of years ago called the Unmaker, Doctor Strange opened a portal to create an EMP that would defeat the Unmaker. This worked, but Strange died before he could close the portal. This resulted in a huge EMP that shut off all electricity on Earth. This led to various wars in the post-apocalypse, killing billions of people. Eventually, things calmed down and people lived in various different communities, surviving against attacks from vampires and werewolves. In Europe, however, the mutant apocalypse had taken over, and using brainwashed geniuses from around the world, began attempting to reawaken the Unmaker for his own villainous deeds. Number 4. Bloodline. In the J.J. and Henry Abrams written storyline from 2019, Mary Jane Watson is killed by a villain known as Cadaverous after Spider-Man is swarmed and beaten pretty badly by his minions. 12 years later, the story has a one-armed version of Peter Parker, who is now the honestly pretty bad single father of Ben Parker, Peter and Mary Jane's son. After Cadaverous returns out of hiding and kidnaps Peter to use his blood for his evil plans, it is up to the new Spider-Man, Ben Parker, with the help of his friend Faye Ito, and old Tony Stark and Riri Williams to fight Cadaverous and his minions, which includes a cyber-zombified team of Avengers. Look guys, in this reality, YouTube has this algorithm thing, right? And when you like and subscribe to us, it signals to the YouTube overlords that we are worthy of being seen by all you lovely people and new people, helping us grow and continue to pump out videos like this one. So I just want to say thanks for doing that for us. We appreciate every like and subscribe you drop. Okay, on to the top 3. Number 3. Earth TRN 852, Heroes Reborn. When Phil Coulson sold his soul to Mephisto in the 2021 event Heroes Reborn, he was given an object called the Pandemonium Cube, which he used to warp reality, creating the alternate world of TRN 852. Here, the Avengers were never assembled, instead replaced by the Squadron Supreme of America, which consisted of the heroes Hyperion, Nighthawk, Power Princess, Blur, Dr. Spectrum, and Skymax. Tony Stark never created the Iron Man armor, Carol Danvers never became a hero, Captain America remained a capsicle, and the Hulk was banished to the negative zone. After the Earth 616 version of Blade ended up on this Earth, he began assembling the Avengers again, starting with Captain Popsicle. Number 2, Earth 001, home of the Inheritors. First appearing in Superior Spider-Man number 33 in September 2014, Earth 001, or Loom World, is home to the Inheritors, who are a clan of very strong beings who hunt and feed upon the life force of animal totems, specifically spider totems, meaning all the Spider-Man and women of the Marvel multiverse. Loom World is also the home to the Master Weaver and the Web of Life and Destiny, which is basically a model of the entire universe and allows for travel to different realities. The Web of Life and Destiny and the Master Weaver were captured by the Inheritor family, who used it to hunt various Spider-Men. The event this takes place in is an awesome one, and if you get the chance, I highly suggest that you give it a read. Number 1, Earth 15513, There Was Nothing, followed by everything. Swirling, burning specks of creation that circled life-giving suns. God, Doom, created the light. Then there was Earth. The firmament cooled and he raised up a land, this holy land, the world, and upon it he set his kingdoms. Earth 15513, also known formerly as Battle World, and more recently as Battle Realm, is where God Emperor Doom created his new world, using the power of the Beyonders after the destruction of the multiverse in the 2015 Secret Wars event. After the final battle between God Emperor Doom and Mr. Fantastic, Battleworld was destroyed and became the center of the new multiverse. The remaining reality became Battle Realm, where the Elders of the Universe, the Grand Master and the Collector, held the contest of champions.
Number 10, Double Death Peter. I don't actually have any issues with Spider-Man dying. I don't wish Peter Parker ill. I just feel like death is such a finite ending that sometimes it can be nice to have that in stories so that sometimes we can just move forward as opposed to getting stuck on repeat, stuck in a loop. What I take issue with though when it comes to Peter's deaths in Ultimates, because yeah, I feel like he definitely got more than one, was that he was killed off kind of suddenly or unceremoniously, which meant he had to be brought back again to do it right. And then after all that, we also find out that he's pretty much immortal. Granted, this does also help to make his multiple deaths make sense and give us a nice, neat little ending for Peter as he passes the torch to Miles. But still, that first death, woo, it was a doozy. During Ultimatum, it seems as though Spider-Man, after being forced to fight his nightmares, gets caught up in the midst of a huge explosion initiated by an equally frustrated Hulk. Of course, overall, he appears to survive, but it seems that the intention here originally was to kill him, and that this death was simply retconned away. Also, I don't know if it's just me, but like, I really don't like the argument between Kitty and MJ at the beginning. They're like, I love him. Well, I love him too. Oh my goodness, be quiet. I'm all about love, but that's so, I don't know, just something about it just grates me. Don't like it. You couldn't possibly understand how I feel because I love him. No, well, I love him, so you couldn't possibly understand how I feel. Ugh. Number 9, Magneto kills Professor X. While this might not seem like such a strange and unsettling thing, keep in mind that Magneto and Charles are often presented in the comic book world as being opponents, but still being friends. While this might not seem like such a strange and unsettling thing, keep in mind that Magneto and Charles are often presented in the comic book world as being opponents, but still being friends. And here, for a long while, they were actually allies on Earth 1610. History aside though, this death is a brutal one, mostly because of how easy Magneto makes it seem. Magneto kills Charles by simply breaking his neck. He just snaps it. He doesn't even go all magnetism on him, though he does do that at other times in the Ultimate Universe. I don't know what exactly Charles did to deserve his life in this reality. I mean, it's not like he ignored the growing sentience of a training room who also happened to be a mutant when he claimed to be fighting for all mutant rights, right? Oh wait. Well, you know, at least he never lied to the X-Men about it. Oh wait. Number 8. Too sexy? Question mark? Is there such a thing? When it comes to the X-Men in this reality, yes, there might just be something as too sexy. And I'm all for sexy. Here, the X-Men were notorious for being overly sexualized. There are a lot of overt sexual moments that happen with our mutants who seem to be weirdly horny a lot of the time. Look, I'm not saying that heroes and villains can't be sexy, or that they can't be sexual. This is comics after all. Sexiness is a big part of the industry and the allure and the history. But even for comics, this feels like a bit much. This also extended beyond X-Men and other characters, with Natasha and Tony's special tape, and Carol and Tony's love-hate relationship that helped them work through some mutual frustration with each other professionally. When it comes to X-Men, we also learned that Wolverine slept with Magneto's wife, Magda, which made people question who Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch's father really was. To add on to that, Wolverine then saw Wanda and Pietro together getting intimate, which is really weird, but it's especially really weird if Wolverine seems to be their dad maybe, or if that's even like a question. Bottom line, I think the thing that most frustrates me about the sexiness in Ultimates is that it feels like it did a lot of this just for the shock factor. Like, it wasn't even about like sexiness for story or like sexiness for sexiness. It was like sexiness so that people would be like, oh, gasp, what am I reading? Number 7, Giant Man eats the Blob. Everybody is eating everybody in Ultimates. I don't know what it is with this world and cannibalism. I guess to be like really edgy, that is one of the final ingredients that you need. I don't know. And you gotta have it in spades, I guess. On part 1, we talked about how Blob was caught devouring the Wasp, and in revenge for the Blob's actions, Hank decided to give him a taste of his own medicine when he found him. As Giant Man, Hank pays the Blob back in kind by killing him through, you guessed it, eating him, biting off his head, clean off. Ugh. Or well, it doesn't look too clean, but you know what I mean. The other awful thing about this gruesome death is that it doesn't really give us even enough time to process the awfulness that was Janet being eaten just like a few moments ago. The story just rushes us through to the next like excessively violent and vengeful moment. And friends, if you occasionally love to hate things, and I know you do. This is fandoms. This is what we do sometimes. We lovingly hate things. Be sure to show that love to hate by giving this video a thumbs up. Thank you so much if you've already done it. It really does help us out, so thank you. Number 6, Death of Cyclops. Quicksilver ends up assassinating Cyclops because he wants to carry on in his father's footsteps. No, Quicksilver, no! Did you not just see what happened during Ultimatum? It wasn't good. We do not need more hardcore Magneto. It was a mess. The other thing that was really weird about this death is that it didn't really lead to anything for Quicksilver. He said he wanted to follow in his father's footsteps, continue his dad's work, create a new brotherhood, but nothing big really ever comes of this. Like, I mean, he creates a new brotherhood, but it's just like a lot of running around without much going on. There's no through line here for this narrative. Number 5, Mr. Sinister. Like, I know Mr. Sinister is kind of a crazy dude, but I feel like we made him crazy in a less interesting way here in Ultimates, if that makes sense. Instead of being obsessed with evolution and teaming up with Apocalypse in order to improve himself, adopting the name Sinister because it's what his wife called him, Nathaniel Essex was instead someone who worked at Oscorp working on a potential new super soldier serum. Because in Ultimates, everything comes back to super soldiers. Now, I personally feel that Mr. Sinister is lesser than in comparison to his 616 counterpart, who is both fabulous, wicked, ruthless, and strangely sane for someone who is so deranged. He's both sane and insane at the same time. I don't know how he does it. But what really irks me is how downplayed and modernized Sinister's look is here in Ultimates. I have 3 words: needs more capes. Number 4, Ultron loves Wanda? One of the weirdest things to happen in Ultimates was when it was actually just a straight up thing that Ultron loved Wanda. Some people have theorized even in the MCU that Vision only loves Wanda because Ultron did, but me, personally, I like to try and distance myself as far as possible from this really weird and strange plot when it comes to theories. I'm not saying that robots don't deserve love. They do deserve love. But in Ultron's case, maybe they don't. I don't know. Ultron saw Pietro as a major competitor for Wanda's affections. For more on that, see part 1 of this list. And when Ultron realized he couldn't have her, he decided no one would, killing her instead. He killed her because he loved her. This excuse in my mind never makes for a great love story or plot, by the way. Don't kill people because you love them. What is that? What is that? Number 3, World War X. I mean, this as an idea on paper seems pretty cool, but where it falls apart is, well, pretty much at the beginning. The whole issue is that the reason for these two groups wanting to actually go to war just doesn't really feel, I don't know, justified. Basically what goes down here is you have Kitty Pryde ruling over Utopia and Jean Grey ruling over Xi'an, or Tian. Not sure if I'm saying that right, but I promise I'm trying. It isn't even really explained how Jean Grey came to be the one in power. She was just appointed to take over by the surviving Zorn brother who died somehow, I think? I don't know what happened there. Jean wants Utopia and Xi'an to become one mutant nation, but Kitty isn't interested in joining. Jean says she doesn't want a war, but insists that Kitty started it, so now there has to be one, even though she doesn't want one? All because Kitty killed some androids left to her by the Zorn brothers. Yeah. And from there, it just gets more ridiculous and weird. I like the idea of a mutant versus mutant faction fight, but this was a weird one. I think you gotta really make it justified, like with Cyclops versus Wolverine, when they kind of had like two different ideologies on how to approach leadership, and then it was like, which team are you? That makes sense to me. Number 2, extreme domestic dispute. Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne have always had a troubled marriage in the comics. Ever since that fateful panel where Hank dramatically and intentionally struck Janet, Hank has been thought of as a troubled man who is more inclined to hurt the ones he loves and thus drives them away. This panel was intended by editor Jim Shooter to actually be redrawn, as he felt the moment should actually be an accident, not something intentional. However, they ran out of time to redo it, and to this day, this action has haunted the character of Hank Pym. So much so that on Earth 1610, it was simply imagined of how much worse he could possibly be to poor Janet. They were like, how worse can this get? Here she tries to stand by Hank even after their relationship gets really rough. It gets really bad when she and Hank end up in a fight with one another, with Janet using her powers against him. While she is shrunk down, Hank then sends his army of ants after her, almost killing Janet as she goes into anaphylactic shock from all the ant stings and bites. It's just terrible. Number 1, blood and gore. Another issue that people had with the Ultimate Universe? Just all the blood and gore that we saw here. And more specifically, all the needless blood and gore. The Ultimate Universe took violence to a new level, and while I'm actually a fan of a gory scene when it holds meaning, many felt that much of what we saw was gratuitous. It was there for the shock factor. Like some of the Marvel Max series that we got, it was more about shocking readers than using the violence or gore to say something really important. There are examples of this littered throughout Ultimates, from Natasha's brutal death at the hands of Hawkeye, not that she didn't deserve it, who pinned her to the wall with arrows, to heads exploding, decapitation, and of course, just lots of cannibalism. Nothing was too gruesome, it seemed, for the Earth of 1610. Number 10, Marvel Zombies. I wouldn't say I hate Marvel Zombies by any means, but it is a world that I'm often reluctant to visit. And yet, here I go, talking about it again. Thank you so much for this, Ultimates. Thank you. I love talking about Marvel Zombies. The alternate universe of Marvel Zombies was actually introduced in the Ultimate line. We learned of this alternate reality when the Fantastic Four of 1610 would be forced into a confrontation with the reality-hopping zombie versions of themselves from Earth Z, aka 2149, who first appeared in Ultimate Fantastic Four in issue 21. Marvel Zombies is a pretty cool idea for an alternate Marvel world, to be honest, especially in the early 2000s when zombies were all the rage with the success of both The Walking Dead and Shaun of the Dead. Honestly, I really love Shaun of the Dead. I think it's one of my favorite movies. However, Marvel Zombies has also now been done to death, or undeath if you will. Often I've found zombie stories suffer from feeling the need to use excessive gore in order to sell us. Like sometimes happens with the Ultimates. There are times when it feels as though it's just all about shocking the readers. And I don't mind being shocked, but I like being shocked when it's like for a purpose, not just being shocked because be shocked by comics, you know what I mean? Number 9, Jean Grey and Wolverine's son. I gotta say, I don't mind Jean Grey becoming a villain in stories, but there are some strange things that go on with her character in terms of motivations on Earth 1610 that do bother me. A big one being the flirty moments that we see between her and Wolverine's son, Jimmy Hudson. For those who aren't aware, Jimmy was the son of Wolverine who was raised by a war buddy of Logan's and his family. Jimmy wouldn't learn until he was older of his true heritage and the fact that he was Logan's biological son. On Earth 1610, Jean Grey spent some time initially dating Wolverine before she ended up with Cyclops, and of course before Wolverine died. Cyclops actually also later dies. Jean just can't catch a break, I guess, in terms of her partner staying alive. Her being the former lover of Wolverine, though, is what makes so many of her flirtatious moments with Jimmy so uncomfortable and weird. He's the son of her ex. Like, what is happening? Also, maybe not everybody got those vibes, but I definitely got those vibes, and I want to be like, what's going on? And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving these lists, all the parts of them, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. I know sometimes in fandoms we love to hate things, and I feel like that's sometimes what these lists are about. But that's okay. It can be fun, as long as it's all in good fun, and we can respect the cool stuff that we know about in the comics as well. Number 8, character motivations. Another thing that seemed to happen in the world of Ultimates was that some characters' motivations seemed to, make less sense than in 616. There were characters who were deemed evil for no real reason, or people who won fights without much explanation or justification for how they beat down someone who was kind of intended to be at their level or possibly above it. A lot of people wished others ill for strange reasons or did things that completely betrayed what they claimed to believe in. Of course, hypocrisy in the world is a very real thing, but I'm not sure we see hypocrisy every day that is quite at the level of what we saw with some characters in Ultimates. Number 7, Blue Tony. One of the weirdest things about Ultimates has to have been the initial origin story that we got for Tony Stark. Originally, Tony Stark was given a very different backstory from his 616 counterpart. He was born as one big brain. Due to his mother suffering from an accident while she was pregnant with him, his genetic makeup was affected and he developed neural tissue throughout his entire body. Hence why I say he's a big brain, despite the fact that, you know, he appears human. So just to be clear, he doesn't look just like a big brain. He looks like a person, but he is a big brain, technically. Tony would evidently be hyper intelligent because of this alteration to his genetics, but he would also have hypersensitive skin. Even the air just touching him felt like intense burns all over his body. Because of this, his father created an armor for him to wear and to protect Tony and allow him to exist semi-normally. This liquid armor his father created also turned his skin blue, hence me calling this point Blue Tony, because he was blue. This version of Tony would get 2 miniseries, but his origins would end up being one of the many things to be retconned away. Number 6, retcons. Retcons on retcons on retcons. Would you like some retcons with that retcon? When it comes to Ultimate Universe, there are so many retcons, it can actually be hard to even keep up with all of them. And so many things were just so bizarre that we might not even remember them as existing. Never mind them being retconned out of existence. Seriously, with Ultimates, I really need that retcon button. Friends, I need a button at my desk that I can just smash every time I find a retcon, so I can have like a counter of all the ones. And never mind the retcons we may have forgotten, there are also the ones that we do remember, jarringly so, because they were never even justified or explained. The retcons that just randomly showed up and you were like, wait, what's happening now? Did I miss something? No, it was just never explained. Or the ones that their explanations were so strange and far-fetched that we simply struggle to remember them because we're like, that doesn't even make sense, so I'm not even gonna put that in my brain. There is, for example, Wanda, aka the Scarlet Witch's death, but then she came back to life, her brother Pietro's death, who also miraculously actually comes back to life. I don't even know if that one was ever explained. Black Panther becoming Steve Rogers, but then just going back to being Captain America without much explanation of what happened to T'Challa afterwards. We know he went home, and so it kind of gets a little fuzzy there. And of course, we just talked about Blue Tony as well. That origin was retconned actually to be the plot of an anime series based on Iron Man that existed in the universe. Because why not? I mean, at least that's a reason that could make sense. Although, if you owned all of those 2 miniseries that were Blue Tony, you'd be like, what did I buy? I bought something that's apparently about an anime now in the world. How would you feel about that? Number 5, dropped plots. Within Ultimates, there were also tons of covers and teases for plots that never really led us anywhere. Hulk was apparently going to join the X-Men, T'Challa was meant to join the Ultimates, but he randomly left and then he never really returned. Quicksilver intended to follow in his father's footsteps, but never really built to any great huge plot. Magneto was killed by Cyclops, but then randomly just shows back up again to console his son, and then I don't think we ever see him again after that, so that's confusing. Various covers teased at scenarios that simply never came to pass. And I'm not talking about alternate covers either, I am talking about main covers. Comic book covers are supposed to give us an indication of the story to come, the story that's inside the comic, a hint at something that exists within that issue. Not completely mislead us with promises of grandeur, showing us scenarios or team-ups that just never happen. And with Ultimates, this was sometimes simply the way. For a world that was meant to be made less confusing by the fact that it didn't have years of continuity to deal with, the Ultimate Universe became really messy pretty fast. Number 4, Kitty and MJ fight over Spider-Man. This whole fight in Ultimatum just, it kills me. While Peter Parker in 616 is often either shipped with Mary Jane Watson, Gwen Stacy, or Black Cat, Felicia Hardy, in 1610, he, for a time, dated Kitty Pryde, who was about the same age as Peter, so it makes sense, it's kinda cute. And the two also teamed up together fighting crime as supers, which also, cute. However, Kitty and Peter wouldn't end up staying together, and eventually they would break up, and he'd end up more predictably with MJ. Despite the fact that Kitty and Peter ended things pretty amicably, we see Kitty and MJ arguing over who loves Peter more during Ultimatum. Just another reason to consider Ultimatum one of the lowest points of the Ultimate line. There is something so annoying and so ridiculous about these two girls bickering over who really loves Peter the most, especially as the world is like falling apart around them. I'm like, what's happening? Why are we having this conversation right now? Why are we having this conversation at all? I guess it's also just like, I'm like, I don't think that's what would be happening with these characters. In my mind, I'm like, I don't believe it. Number 3, Jonathan Hickman. One of the worst things to happen to the Ultimate Universe would probably be Jonathan Hickman leaving it. But also, maybe just Jonathan Hickman in general. Hickman was one of the creatives called in to help revive the Ultimate line after it had been murked by Ultimatum. In the end, the creative paramedics would not be able to save it, despite breathing new and exciting life into it. In fact, years down the line, after Hickman had left Ultimates, he'd kind of also be the one to destroy it, with his Avengers run where we learn about the incursions and where eventually the Time Runs Out storyline would take place. However, the Ultimate line might be gone, but the Ultimate Universe would be brought back to life later on. In fact, actually, Hickman is still a huge Maker fan, and even has been intertwining the 1610 version of Reed Richards' Children of Tomorrow into his current X-Men run and the world of X-Men with the Children of the Vault. So it's like a mixed bag with Jonathan Hickman. He's like the worst thing to have left, the worst thing to have happened because he killed it. But he also, obviously, I feel like he loves Ultimates. I feel like it does hold a special place in his heart, because I feel like he loves a lot of the characters there. So, yeah, I don't know. I love it. Who doesn't love the Maker, though, am I right? He's just so cool. Such a freaky guy. Number 2, Wolverine creeps on MJ. One of the weirdest things to happen in the Ultimate Universe takes place during a case of the body swaps. Wolverine and Spider-Man wake up one day in one another's bodies without any idea of how they got there. Just like in the main continuity reality of Earth 616, these two don't really get along in the Ultimate Universe. They end up discovering what happened and making contact with one another, planning to meet up and basically figure out like how to swap back or like what's going on. But after this all gets resolved, we also learn that Wolverine, who is not just an adult man by the way, but potentially a super old adult man due to his healing factor, attempted while in Peter's body to make very intimate and adult moves on Mary Jane, Peter's girlfriend, who here is also a teenager. Ew! Like, I know you have a thing for redheads, bub, but stick to redheaded adults, not teenagers. Ugh. Gross. Number 1, Ultimate Doom. Doom was such a mess in the Ultimate Universe just because of all the ever-developing retcons about which Doom was the real Doom. Victor Van Dame was our Doom of Earth 1610, but we later learned that actions we believed were him were actually a Doom bot, and that he'd also actually been replaced for a time by Mary Storm. He was like basically going into alternate realities. It's a lot. If you thought Doom of Earth 616 with all of his Doom bots was confusing, the continuity here is well, it's really only more of a mess in my mind, especially considering how some important actions were later retconned as not being caused by Doom, and how it became confusing going back to know like when Doom was actually the true Doom or when it had been an imposter in disguise.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Fantastic Four. Written by Alan Davis, we pick up on this issue 20 years after the death of Franklin and Valeria Richards. So in this 6-issue epic, we see the return of Dr. Doom, and he's got a bit of an upgrade. He's rebuilt himself after the Mutant War, and now he's more machine than anything. The Fantastic Four, of course, reunites to take down the returned Doom. Now, I have to start this at number 10 because for an end story, it feels like they're just coming back together to save the day. The stakes are high, of course, but not too high. Still a great time nonetheless. But before we go on to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and toss us a thumbs up, because it really goes a long way for us here at the studio. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Now back to some dark endings. Number 9, Doctor Strange. Written by Leah Williams, this 2020 comic marks the final days of Doctor Strange. He's older and alone. That's right, we pick up in this cyberpunk future world that just forgot about magic. He is the last true magician. Not even David Blaine is left. That's how desperate we are. So he makes the ultimate power move to restore magic to the world, going toe-to-toe with the cosmic entity, Eternity. This one-shot is amazing, and fans loved it, noting that the tone of hopelessness is carried out well throughout these pages. Even casual readers will be pleased with the way things come to a close in this emotional closing chapter. Number 8, Miles Morales. Written by Saladin Ahmed, released earlier this year, The End, Miles Morales, older and wiser, struggles to defend a post-apocalyptic Brooklyn. With this new warlord who thinks he's just this new patriotic hero, basically just a crazy, mad version of Captain America, and he plans on taking out Miles, and then of course Brooklyn will no longer have a leader, making it for easy pickin', as he says, of course. Now Miles needs to sacrifice himself to save the day, and it's quite a lot for a single one-shot, but it's a pretty fitting conclusion all in all. Number 7, Iron Man. Written by Bob Layton and David McKelvey, we see, of course, an older Tony Stark explaining that he spent 50 years building Stark Universal into the global juggernaut that it is today. That's 50 years of battling bombs, bullies, and buyouts, only to have a more subtle enemy slip through my defense when I wasn't looking. Time! Yeah, so Tony at this point is looking for a suitable replacement for his tech and eventually for Iron Man. And he finds this in a young scientist named Nick Travis. But an Iron Man story feels almost incomplete without another big bad metal suit going against Tony, and this time in the form of Ultra Dynamo. The comic touches on Tony's declining health, and for a one-shot, it's actually a pretty decent send-off. A little bit different than how he went off in the MCU. A little less sad, I think. Number 6, Wolverine. We love to see an aging, dying Wolverine. I mean, Logan was one of the best superhero movies I'd seen in a very long time, and the R rating just needs to happen for some of these stories to be told, or at least have them told properly. So in Wolverine the End, we again see an aged Wolverine as he embarks to take down the last of the Weapon X program. All the while, he's dealing with himself becoming less and less immortal. So this 6-parter is a lovely time. It opens up with Wolverine in the snowy landscapes of Canada, struggling to even hunt a deer. A deer! And then he reminds himself how old he's getting, because as he tries to pull his claws back in, it pains him more and more. That's not a good sign. The voice in Wolverine's head does a lot of heavy lifting for the narrative, and watching this struggle is sad yet weirdly poetic. And on top of this personal problem, he has to deal with his long-lost dead brother in order to save America from a nuclear fallout. Fans have expressed how the final antagonist was a bit over the top in a story like this, but the soul-searching Logan must-do makes it worth the read after all. Number 5, Marvel's The End. Of course, this 6-part series written by Jim Starlin is full of cosmic chaos. The heart of the universe, first discovered by the Celestial Order, brought peace, of course, to the universe. They picked the ancient Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaton as their agent on Earth. Now, this power eventually started to corrupt him, and then he travels to present-day Earth to kill most of Earth's mightiest heroes. So Dr. Doom's like, whoa, no thank you, and then goes back in time to try and kill him while he was still a human, before all that jazz. Which is a great idea. I mean, like Rhodes recommended in Endgame, the whole plan for Thanos. But it of course doesn't go as planned. They can't just do that. So Akhenaton doesn't let this happen. Thanos has now entered the chat. The Great Titan becomes aware of this power. He gets together with the remaining heroes like Captain Marvel and the Defenders, and then Thanos destroys the machine that allows the Order to use the Heart's power. So where does this power now go to? That's right, you guessed it, right into Thanos. So Thanos uses his newfound power to go back in time to take down the Order before they found the heart of the universe. And on top of that, also prevent Doctor Doom from killing his past self. And to make matters worse, the Living Tribunal gathered a bunch of, cosmic beings like Eternity, Infinity, Death, Galactus, and the Celestials to stop Thanos. Number 4, Punisher. Written by Garth Ennis, this 2004 one-shot features a lot of F-bombs, like holy and takes place, of course, in a post-apocalyptic future, with the time being referred to as simply soon. So this is soon. Awesome, lovely, thank you for the heads up. So we open up in Sing Sing prison. During a nuclear fallout, Frank Castle has been in the prison for years. He's laying low in the fallout shelter in the prison with some other prisoners until he decides he's had enough, breaks out, and then heads to New York City. He brings along with him Paris Peters. He's an arsonist, which is a perfect sidekick. And they head to New York, just traveling through radiation and remains of buildings. It truly does look and feel like the end. So they find the Manhattan bomb shelter and they get in, but they quickly pass out. Why? Well, because that radiation they ignored, it starts to finally kick in and cause effect. They wake up in an infirmary with doctors explaining how they're gonna die within the coming hours, and then Frank of course kills them all brutally and then goes on to discover a boardroom with the Coven, who he found out about during his time at Sing Sing. So the Coven is a group of generals, senators, billionaires, anyone important, basically the people in power responsible for escalating the war just for profit gains. So with twists and turns about who they really are, Frank will face the biggest challenge of his life, all while against the ticking fatal clock. Number 3, Venom. Written by Adam Warren, Venom: The End is a tale older than time, or something like that. See, the one-shot spans over 1 trillion years, with Venom traveling through space and time, and it starts off with the symbiote dealing with the death of Eddie Brock. Or not dealing with, rather, is I guess more appropriate. So Venom is now set on bringing back Eddie, and bonding with everybody in the universe sure is one way to try and make that happen. That's right, Venom becomes the guardian of the last organic beings in the universe. It's wild. Each page is just covered with content. It takes time to really absorb it all, because it's a pretty wild ending, and it's beautifully drawn as well. Cruz delivers these epically detailed space battles that complement one of the best Venom stories ever created. Straight up. Number 2, Deadpool. Written of course by Joe Kelly, we have the final Deadpool story, which is shocking because Wade's known for cheating death more than a few times. See, this issue deals with a lot of Deadpool's past. It's quite enjoyable. They touch on his relationship with Death, touch on his daughter, his ex-wife Shikla, and then all the while there's some brutal killings just to make it fun, which looks better than ever with Mike Hawthorne bringing those pages to life. Part of this issue shows Deadpool squaring off against an Asgardian Gundam Deadpool, so we got some cosmic elements sprinkled in nicely. Now of course the issue has a lot of heart, because while being immortal, Deadpool has to watch his loved ones age off and die. And he wants to be with them again eventually. Now it's not just one ending in this issue either, there's multiple endings, which is just so fun, each totally different than the other. Some endings are like these Hollywood endings, some are happy, some are sad, some are scary, and on top of all that goodness, we see Blind Al dressed as the Black Widow. So if you're not sold by now, I don't know what else to tell you. And finally coming in at number 1, we have Hulk: The End. Written by Peter David, released in 2002, Hulk: The End is a one-shot that takes place in a world where nobody is left but Bruce Banner and the Hulk. So in a world probably resembling our near future, following a war that ended in, you guessed it, nuclear fallout, the issue starts with Banner vlogging. Yeah, he's accompanied by a vidbot, which is a floating camera that always hovers 10 feet away from him, keeping that social distance, I like it. And is basically assigned to confirm and record the fate of the final human on Earth. Banner doesn't mind it at all, but the Hulk, he hates it. God, that would be so annoying too. I feel like TMZ is gonna have these soon, just following you around like, Matthew Perry, what's going on? So Banner just absorbs all this nuclear energy, and now he walks about the wastelands that he once called home. Totally alone though. No, God no. I mean, he has these giant mutated cockroaches to keep him company, which is beautiful and also so disgusting. They look very moist the way they're drawn. And it's a really dark and cold ending for Bruce, literally. I mean, the Hulk just wants to be the biggest, baddest creature ever on the planet, and Banner, he wants to die. He's ready to die. The ending is wild here. I mean, Bruce suffers a heart attack, but the Hulk still remains. So if the Hulk were to transform back into Banner, he would also die. which is a no deal. So with the last words of the Hulk reading, Hulk, strongest one there is, Hulk, only one there is, Hulk feels cold. Wow, I guess we all feel kind of cold after that one. Thank you, Hulk, for making our heart go